Hey, how is everybody doing? Hopefully everybody is well. My name is Derek Melinda, and of course I'm here on behalf of the Knights of Last Call. What is going on, everyone? Hopefully you are all doing well. It's an exciting time. It's December. Welcome, happy December to everybody. We here at Knights of Last Call just finished up our massive Northern Reaches campaign, so that's pretty sweet. We actually had a massive, the very high, 9 highest level characters, the champions of Northport, took on a would-be god, which was played by me and Aaron and Bob. It was a 3-headed god. It was pretty sweet. So we had a lot of fun with that, and the group, showcased their quality of their merits, the quality of their equipment, of their choices, and they were able to take out the encounter in about probably about two hours and change. So we had a lot of fun with that. Anyways, so we're hanging out tonight. It felt pretty, I don't know, it felt like a nice night, and I am going to be out of town later this week, so there's not going to be a Thursday stream. And so I figured, I'm feeling all right. I'm feeling like I've got some energy. We sometimes do these super secret Sunday special system streams in the past to sort of talk about game systems and stuff that we,
Jason B tipped $10. Man, this was the system I wanted to steal. Too bad I got the other one. The imitation we made after was just not quite the same. Oh well.
Thank you, Jason B, for your honesty and your candor. I think obviously tonight we're going to be talking about 4th edition D&D. You should join us Tuesday. So I know we kind of talked about doing Quest for the Frozen Flame. In case you missed it, last Tuesday we ran into major technical issues. I could not connect to Foundry or anything that seemed like it was being hosted on an Amazon web server, and we had to cancel the stream. So obviously everyone was expecting for that to be over, so people have made plans. So we're not going to be able to finish it this Tuesday. So we're going to be finishing it next Tuesday. I should say that would be the 13th. And so tonight and this Tuesday, we're gonna talk about some systems. Tonight we're gonna be taking a look back. We're gonna be looking back at 4th edition. And Tuesday, I wanna find a couple systems that I have very little experience with, and I want to take a look at them. And I know that Ben from our Discord, Ben A, has recommended that I take a look at Broken Compass, which is sort of a pulp fantasy action adventure game. He's spoken very highly of it, so I'm going to be taking a look at that kind of live. First looks on Tuesday, and I think I'm going to look at another one too. So Tuesday we might do like a 3-hour live stream and maybe spend an hour and a half on one system, an hour and a half on another system. So one of the things I want to do with this channel is branch out a little bit. And if we wanted to be really super successful, we'd be talking about 5th edition D&D nonstop or 1D&D nonstop. Instead, I'm going to talk about the role-playing games that I'm interested in, and I'm going to talk about the role-playing games that I think sound fun or sound interesting or have a good story to tell, and, that's where we're going to be. We're going to, obviously, Pathfinder 2 is still an important part of our channel. We're playing it as an adventure path. Well, we're about to wrap up this adventure. But, our Northern Reaches game is Pathfinder 2 based. So there's always going to be a home here for Pathfinder 2, but, as you all know, the big shelf behind me has a lot of different game systems on it, and it just seems like a shame to not talk about more of them and kind of dig into them. So here we are. 4th edition D&D. The much maligned system. Now, I will say tonight, the cool little app or Chrome browser extension that I normally use to be able to click on your messages and make them pop up is not working. I posted a couple issues on the gentleman's GitHub that runs it, but unfortunately I won't be able to highlight your messages tonight. So I will try to just call out if anybody has any specific questions or comments. Please feel free to type question or in all caps or something if you do have a question that you would like me to kind of talk about or a topic, a subject matter that you would like me to sort of dig into. We can do that a little bit. And outside of that, I would recommend that if you're enjoying the content, hit that like and subscribe button. Maybe click the bell if you want to hear when we get our live streams or these kind of impromptu live streams, especially that sometimes crop up on a Sunday night. You might not be ready for it. They do happen. And of course, if you really want to support us, this stream, as is all other streams, comes courtesy of the incredible largesse of the Knights of the Last Call patrons, who support us with their, not just their money, but with their friendship and their time and their energy. And so much about the value of our community is in the people themselves. So big shout out to them. Really appreciate it. And here we are tonight. So, 4th edition D&D. Well, briefly speaking, I kind of want to talk about a couple of things tonight. Obviously, I want to answer your questions, but I kind of want to talk about a couple things. One, why 4th edition seems to be gaining some speed. It seems to be gaining some momentum. So, I want to talk about that and why that might be. And then 2, I want to talk about what 4th edition does well. And I think to, sort of start off with my background and my experience with 4th edition. So 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons came out in 2008. And myself and Mr. Smith, William Brandis in the chat, were at Gen Con in 2007 when they announced it, when they released it, when they basically said, hey, I know you've been playing 3rd edition for 7 years, but guess what? Next year, 4th edition D&D comes out. And everybody was kind of in a tailspin because nobody really knew what that meant. There were no hints of this. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, we can go back to some of those really late 3rd edition books that came out. Books like Book of Nine Swords, Tome of Battle, Monster Manual 4 and Monster Manual 5, Dungeonscape. All of these books were testing grounds for ideas and concepts that would make their way into 4th edition D&D. But at the time, we didn't know that. Now, I will say, at the time when those books came out, Dungeonscape in particular, Book of Nine Swords, Tome of Battle in particular, some of the ideas and monsters from Monster Manual 5 in particular, I was like, I really like these. This is a really interesting idea. And when 4th edition came out, we embraced it wholeheartedly. And we, Aaron Dragon, that's a great point. Yeah, Star Wars Saga Edition. That's also true. We went ahead and we took a look at it, and we were like, this is the direction D&D is going. This is where we want to go. And we picked it up, and we really, really liked it. And we proceeded to have a 30 level. Yes, the game goes to level 30. We proceeded to have a 30 level campaign that took about a year and a half or a little bit more to run. We then ran another 2 or 3 4th edition campaigns. In fact, the original Northern Reaches was actually a campaign that I ran with some overworld politics, mass combat systems added to it. Aaron ran a couple 4th edition campaigns. But, it is well known that the life cycle of the game was fairly short. It did not sell. It sold well, but it did not sell as well as I think the corporate people at Wizard of the Coast wanted it to sell. And the game was plagued by, I don't want to say it was too early, and I don't want to say that they missed the mark, but I do think the game was plagued by a lot of negative press, by a lot of very angry, grognards who did not like the direction that the game was going. And, the game, unfortunately, sort of tried to shift direction and to appease those older, crowd of players. At the very end of the game, it sort of got a little bit wonky. They came out with this D&D Essentials lineup, which was 4th edition D&D, but they really, stripped out a bunch of the elements that really made 4th edition, in an attempt to appease them. That didn't work. Pathfinder 1 had come in. It was really gaining market share, and that kind of is what led to 5th edition, which in my opinion was originally designed, and I was part of some of those really early alpha playtests, of being like, it was a big mea culpa. It was Wizards of the Coast saying, you know what, you're right, we ran too far, we ran too fast, we got too close to the sun, we tried to do something different, You guys don't like different. You don't like change. We're sorry. We apologize. Here's 5th edition D&D. Look at it. There's no rules. It's just like your 1980s Dungeons and Dragons with a little bit of polish. Don't worry about there being well formatted, well structured rules. It's all going to be kind of a mishmash of stuff. And then, that's what 5th edition was. I think it was designed to be an apology for 4th edition. So that's sort of my background with 4th edition. I would say, I really liked the edition. I had problems with it. I have problems with every role-playing game I've ever played. And I will say that after playing it for 4 or 5 years, more or less, we were good, at least at the time, for a change and for a shift. And we went back to 3rd edition, and then we went to Pathfinder 1. And we played Pathfinder 1 for a long time. And then we dabbled 5e, and we said, this is not for us. And we went back to Pathfinder 1. And in between all of that, this was actually a big awakening for me, because in that time frame, 2010, 2011, 2012, is when I started playing Dungeon World and Powered by the Apocalypse games. Apocalypse World, Dungeon World, Monster Hearts, Fate. And these games really sort of changed the way that I approach role-playing games in general. It was very much a spiritual awakening for me, and I thought that was a really, really, really awesome time for me. So, I have a very fond memory of my time playing the edition. We had some really great and incredible moments. I would say that the Dungeons and Dragons campaign, which I played, or I was the game master, that had the most player buy-in, what you all would call role-playing, which I will call fluffy bullshit time, that had the most, role-playing, that had the most developed, intricate character arcs, and these were arcs that were not preset. These were character drives and motivations that, in my opinion, the game helped support. I had players writing short stories. I had players between sessions. I had players regularly emailing each other between sessions to talk about the game, talk about their character, and talk about some of the mechanical choices, but also talk about sort of the evolving narrative. The biggest example of this to ever happen was in my 4th edition campaign. So I think the first thing I want to sort of clear up here is this idea that 4th edition, this is called the Stormwind fallacy. And the Stormwind fallacy is basically saying that, like, if your character is trying to optimize, or if you're trying to make a character that's effective, that you can't role play. And I think 4th edition sort of was a victim of the Stormwind fallacy, which is this idea that, my character has, feats and options and mechanics. That means you can't role play. And in my experience, it was just the opposite. My 4th edition games were some of the most role-playing intensive game, not just the individual sessions, but as a whole. The character arcs that these characters went through on their journey from level 1 to 30 were amazing. You had characters change up their entire way of being and completely rebuild their characters because of what's happening within their but what was happening within the game. It was very, very, very awesome, very amazing to see. Now, to be clear, a lot of that had nothing to do with 4th edition. What that had to do with was players who were bought into the campaign. And this kind of is something that I've reiterated, and I'll say again and again and again, which is, it doesn't matter what system you're running. If your players are engaged, your players are going to be engaged. If it's a system that they want to engage with, if it's a story, a narrative, goals, motivations that they want to be a part of, then your game is going to be successful. So, I think that 4th edition received this hate that it was this sort of video game. Now, that being said, there is no doubt in my mind that when 4th edition was being designed, they were looking at what it's 4th edition, 3rd edition was written when, Wizards of the Coast was Wizards of the Coast. They bought TSR in 98, 99, and 3rd edition came out, and that was them. By the time 4th edition came out, they were under Papa Hasbro. And now they had this corporate master to please. There's no doubt in my mind that 4th edition was designed to be an edition of D&D that would be more broadly appealing. The way that we think of 5th edition is being broadly appealing today. That was what the goal was for 4th edition. And I will be the first to admit, I was at that announcement in 2007. They kind of shit talked on their old player base. And they basically said, if people want to play the old way, that's fine. Let them. And I think they were kind of like, we don't need that player group. That player group is happy with what they're playing. They're going to keep playing 3rd edition. They're going to keep playing 2nd edition. But we want to bring new people into the hobby. We want to grow the hobby. And they thought that 4th edition was the way that it was going to work. And it wasn't. Maybe they were too early. Maybe they missed the mark. Because to be fair, I don't think there's anything special about 5th edition. I think if you would release 5th edition in 2008 as a way to grow the mark, it would have failed. 5th edition was just at the right time. The combination of brand and intellectual property and geekdom being at a high peak after Game of Thrones and Harry Potter, a generation raised on this stuff, live streaming, these big marquee tentpole live streams. The environment was just right for 5th edition to have this explosive moment. But that is what they wanted. And I think they thought the way that they were going to do that was by having a very clear and very direct set of rules. And that is what 4th edition is trying to do. If you've never seen a 4th edition book, they are extremely, the formatting of the player's handbook and all of the books are extremely clear cut. Now, you may not necessarily like the formatting, but everything about your character is defined in a very, very specific way. The colors mean something. Even on the books themselves, if a book has like a blue spine, then it means it is a player's book. If the book has a green spine, it means that it's a monster book. If the book has sort of a red spine, it means it is a dungeon master book. And so they really went above and beyond to try to make it as readable as possible. They wanted things to sort of be very clear about what it did. And the idea was, we will leave, they wanted to build a really great cake and leave the frosting and the decoration to you as a player, to you as a dungeon master. They weren't as concerned with necessarily telling you, here's the names of every single person who lives in this village, and here's what everything looks like, and here's exactly what this spell, does or looks like. A lot of it was up to the DM and for the players to sort of interpret. Yes, these powers, some had flavor text in italics, but they were really up to you in order to bring it to your character's life.
At $3, can we get some love for how clean the layout of these books are? So pleasant to my eye.
Yeah, I mean, there are some people who feel like these books are cold and heartless, and I will agree that they are not as enjoyable to read as a book, as a novel, sitting in your comfortable chair and going through them. Okay, they are kind of cold and clinical. It's not like they're just literally lists of abilities, but when you get to some of these things, it's an instruction booklet. But I'll tell you this, I don't know about you, but my player's handbook is a reference manual. It is an instruction booklet. And when I'm playing a board game and I have a question and I want to look something up and I want a clear and precise answer, I don't want to be having to figure out what's flavor text, what's not flavor text. This power or ability is buried in the middle of a, long line of text, paragraphs of information. I want it to be clear and in my face, even if it does, quote, look, like it's dead. Now, some people really like this. I think it's very interesting. I think it's very exciting to look through all of these powers and abilities. By the way, speaking about what we were talking about before, you can see some of the color coding. You can see that any spell or ability that is usable at will, as often as you would like, is color coded with this sort of bright green. And anything that's only usable once per every 5 minutes or once per encounter is sort of in this reddish color. And then something that is daily is in this kind of green-gray color. I'm colorblind. It's not really the best option for me. I don't know what color that is, but I can tell the difference is the point. And so I can quickly tell, here are your level 2 utility powers. You can see without even looking at anything, these ones right here are usable once per day. And these ones here are usable once every 5 minutes, or basically once a fight. You could tell that because of the colors that these things have. So, readability and all this other stuff was very, very important. But I think what, we talked about here at the beginning is why 4th edition and why now? And I know that, there's some stuff here in chat. And I saw earlier that John asked, are we sure about this? Well, from my understanding, from the 4E subreddit on Reddit, from the 4E Discord, there does seem to be a pretty marketed increase in people interested in 4th edition. And that makes sense to me because, 5th edition has been out for a long time, 10 years, more or less. And, we only had 3rd edition. 2nd edition came out in 89 and, 3rd edition came out in 2000. So, the distance between where we're at today and 4th edition, I mean, some of these people who are playing 5th edition today might have been, 6 or 7 or 8 when 4th edition came out. Some of them might have been born around the time 4th edition came out. For a lot of people, they just weren't even aware that role-playing games existed. And so, the hate of the edition wars and stuff is long in the past. And I think you have a lot of people doing, Mark, I saw your comment, and the Spell Plague was horrible, 100%, unredeemable, 100%, yes. What they did your Forgotten Realms with 4th edition was terrible. I will agree to that. And while Aaron loved 4E Forgotten Realms, I'm on the Spell Plague was weak sauce, but I think you have 5th edition players who, tired of the ambiguity of 5th edition, want something a little bit more clean cut, and 4th edition is kind of like the cool old edition. And Pathfinder 1 is sort of the replica of 3rd edition, so I think 3rd edition sort of stayed in people's mindset more, and 3E and 5E are kind of similar in some senses. And, if you're going to play Pathfinder, it's like if you're going to play 3rd edition, you might as well play Pathfinder 1. And if you're going to play Pathfinder 1, you might as well play Pathfinder 2. 4E stands alone. And I think it's being attracted or being drawn to it by 5th edition players who maybe are, they want something a little bit more crunchy than what you're, getting into it. And I think that's, fantastic. And, I think if you know 4th edition the way I know 4th edition, there's a lot of stuff in 5th edition. There's a lot of stuff, some stuff in Pathfinder 2, which is pretty much taken from 4th edition. I think a lot of people understand that the game design choices that they made to have a very, very balanced game were very smart. You could argue about the presentation. You could argue about some of the mechanics behind them, or the resources and the reasons behind them. But ultimately, I think it's a fantastic idea. So I kind of want to quickly talk about this idea of, why, or, what is it that, for me, this is for me, what is it about 4th edition that really stands out? And why 4th edition, hold on a second, my tablet died, there we go. There we go. And why 4th edition, I think, is a very cool game. So the first thing is this. And again, these are sort of in no particular order, but 4th edition, for me, these are the pros, right? So the first thing is, there's equity between, especially between the classes. A lot of people say, 3rd edition, spellcasters were way more powerful than marshals. It's my understanding that most people feel that way about 5th edition as well. Sometimes in Pathfinder 2, I think the comment can be made that the opposite is true, and that casters feel overly penalized. Right, wrong, there's a flavor to it. But in 4th edition, there is martial characters, casting characters. Those distinctions essentially become meaningless because everybody kind of gets to do the same thing. Now, they all have different flavors that are different about it. They all get different ways of doing certain things. And sometimes, I'll be honest with you, I don't want to sound gatekeepy, but a lot of times when people say that the powers in 4th edition seem very samey, it's because they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And it's because they did not play 4th edition, and they did not go into the depths of it like some people have, yours truly, to understand the differences between of that. Because in 4th edition, there are, yes, it is true. In fact, here, if you look at this chart, which I've rolled up, this is what I was looking for, you can see that every class gets, and on the right-hand side, you can see how many at-will powers you get, how many encounter powers you get, how many daily powers you get, and how many utility powers get. It's the same for everybody, okay? A 5th level rogue has the same number of powers as a 5th level wizard, as a 5th level cleric, as a 5th level fighter. They all get the same number of powers. And guess what? The fighter's powers are, for the most part, the same power level as the wizard's powers, as the rogue's power. But they do different things. And they do things specifically different in order to reinforce that class's particular niche or role or job within the party. It is, difficult. Oh, we got a tip from Boothby.
Boothby tipped $10. Our group had a lot of fun with 4E for a while. What grated on us was too much equity. Each class had a great mix of at-will, encounter, and daily powers. But the fighter had the same mix as the wizard. The classes eventually seemed to play the same.
I understand that complaint. Okay, and I know this sounds crazy, and I know this sounds weird, but for things to be balanced, that means you're not any more powerful than me, and you're not any more powerful than I am. We all should be able to do something in a combat. We should all be able to help out in every encounter. I mean, a big part of 4th edition's mantra was, I grew up playing 3rd edition and 2nd edition. In 3rd edition D&D, rogues could not sneak attack undead. They could not sneak attack constructs. And without a sneak attack, the rogue in 3rd edition really sucked. I mean, they really sucked. And the idea was, hey, an encounter with undead, that's the cleric's chance to shine. So we're going to make the rogue not be able to sneak attack, but the cleric gets their turn undead ability. And the cleric is going to feel really powerful because the rogue looks like a bitch. That's fine. That is one way to approach game design. 4th edition said, fuck that. Like, we want people to be able to play the game at all times. And, you might say that it can feel like it's a little bit samey, but William Brandis just took the words out of my mouth. That's like saying the Pathfinder 2 feels a bit samey because everybody gets, all the martial characters go to expert at level 5 and 13. All the everybody gets a 2, 4, everybody gets a class feat at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, you know, everybody ends up with the same armor class. That's true. They do in Pathfinder 2. And guess what? That's why the game works. Because you're able to reliably be able to count on what these abilities and what these characters were going to be able to do. Now, if you want a bunch of wildly separate abilities that do a million different things, oh, I mean, that is true. That 4th edition is not a great game for that. But I promise you, nobody knows how to balance that stuff. And the more that the game has these wildly different abilities and different concepts between characters, the worse it gets in terms of trying to, you know, make everybody be able to do the same thing. So I mean, I think that's one thing that I really like about the game is it felt like every class was cool. All right. And again, these are my personal takes. Like I said, I'll answer your questions. We'll talk about, you know, why it is, but I'll talk about why I think what are the strengths of this particular edition of Dungeons & Dragons. I got to plug in my Wacom tablet here. All right. Whoop. All right. So second thing is, you know, is clarity. Of role. Now, this is true for both monsters and this is true for your character. In 4th edition, each player character class belongs to one of 4 roles. Okay? They're defender, striker, leader, and controller. So in these instances of these games, or in these instances, oh sheesh, these roles define what your character should do in a combat encounter. And the abilities and the powers that you got from your class supported that. So the defender's job was to defend their allies, right? Now, that doesn't mean that that's the only thing that they could do, but it means that the powers and abilities that class got really gave it the ability to do that thing. And this is where some people can get a little wonky with 4th edition. And this is this idea of sort of effects-based design. Okay. Effects-based design simply means that in some board game designs, in some game designs, we talk about top down. I think we've talked about it on this channel before. We talk about top down design and bottom up design. So in a top down design, okay, you're starting with this, this idea. I want to do, I want to do an Egyptian themed world, or I want to do a Greek mythology themed world. And you go, okay, well, we're going to do a Greek mythology themed world. Okay. Well, now we have to build mechanics and we have to build in monsters and feats and roles that are going to support those, Greek myth type ideas, right? Like the gods in the sky and probably some sort of Hydra monster, right? So it's like, it's like, what is our idea for this game? And now we have to build elements into it. Okay. So strategy, you said 4E is very top down. I think it's actually very bottom up. 4E was sort of more like, let's make powers and abilities that let you do what you need to do first, mechanically. And then we'll figure it out what it means in the game world later. All right. So in other words, in 4th edition, and by the way, there are plenty of instances of this in Pathfinder 2. And Pathfinder 2 says, look, we need this game to do this thing in order for the game to work. Okay. So in 4th edition, for example, let's use the fighter as an example. Okay. The fighter, the humble fighter. We'll bring over the fighter here. Where are you at, fighter? There's the cleric. There's the fighter. Okay. Well, we're still in the cleric. Here we go. The fighter. Okay. Here's our fighter. And if we look here, I'm going to see if I can zoom in and that won't break everything. All right. Here's our fighter. So the fighter has this thing called combat challenge. Okay. And here's what it says. It says, in combat, it's dangerous to ignore a fighter. Every time you attack an enemy, whether that attack hits or misses, you can choose to mark the target. This is like a condition that 4th edition often refers to as someone being marked by you. The mark lasts until the end of your next turn. And while a target is marked, it takes a -2 penalty to attack rolls for any attack that does not include you as a target. So simply put, if a fighter swings a sword at you or shoots an arrow at you or makes an attack roll against you, if the fighter wants to, you are now marked by that fighter. And you will take a -2 penalty to attack anyone who isn't that fighter. Now, again, I don't need to, we kind of touched on this, but we talked about the roles. Well, I should tell you that, the fighter is a defender. Okay, that's their role. The fighter's job is to defend their party. And this ability specifically speaks to that ability. Why? Because if I'm the GM or the DM, and a fighter just attacked me, well, if I attack anybody else, I'm going to get a penalty to my attack roll. I don't get a penalty to my attack roll if I attack the fighter. In addition, as if that wasn't enough incentive, whenever a marked enemy that is adjacent to me either shifts, that's like a 5-foot step in Pathfinder 2 terminology, or if it makes an attack that does not include me, I can make an attack of opportunity basically against them immediately. So, going back to our example before, if I was here, if my fighter was like right here, this is my fighter, and this is my buddy, the rogue, and we're fighting this monster. Monster's a tough word to spell. All right. If I attack this monster as my fighter, I can mark that monster. Now that monster, if it tries to attack anybody else, 1, it gets a -2 penalty to its attack roll. 2, if it's attacking and I'm next to the monster still, my fighter gets to make an attack of opportunity against that monster for free, just because it didn't try to attack me. Now, you can see this is where I talk about bottom-up design, because they started off with the idea of, look, we need for this fighter to do something mechanically in the game, that will make people want to attack the fighter. Okay, we need something mechanical in the game that will enable us to do this. Now, the issue, I said this is effects-based design, because there might be you might have already thought about this. What is the fighter doing actually? Right? It just says here, it's dangerous to ignore the fighter. Whenever they miss an enemy or hit an enemy, they can choose to mark the target. What does that mean? Guess what? The game doesn't really tell you. Now, does that mean that you and your players should ignore that? No. But the point is, it can mean whatever you want it to mean. It could be whatever fluffy bullshit time thing you want it to be. All right? So The game is more concerned with giving you effects and mechanics that function well and create a gameplay experience that delivers. It wasn't as interested in figuring out all of the themes and all that other stuff for you, okay? It left a lot of that to your imagination. For example, we're right here in chat, okay? My fighter hits the the beholder or the giant with his greatsword. And now it's marked. Okay? What does that mean? I don't know. Well, let's say maybe it means that my fighter is standing toe to toe to him and he's disrupting the giant. He's getting in his way. He's ducking and weaving. Maybe my fighter, even though my fighter missed, right? Maybe my fighter's attack threw the giant off balance. Okay, and the giant isn't set up to be able to attack anyone but me. Maybe it means that my fighter is challenging them and taunting them and basically saying, like, come and face me. It can be any of those things. It could be all of those things. The point is, those things don't affect the mechanics of the game. And quite frankly, the game doesn't care what you're describing your fighter doing. All that matters is that this thing happens, because that's what needs to happen for the game to be balanced. How it happens and why it happens, that's up to you. Okay? That's up to you. Now, look, I'm not going to try to say that this thing is completely devoid of flavor or ideas about, how to make your character cool and fundamentally, buy into it. In fact, like I said, all of the abilities that your character could get always have a little bit of of fun little flavor text in here, here we go. Passing attack, it says, you strike at one foe and allow momentum to carry you forward into a second strike against a second foe. It's giving you a little bit of flavor. It's okay, cool. That's what my character's doing. Spinning sweep says you spin beneath your enemy's guard with a long, powerful cut, and then sweep your leg through his an instant later to knock him head over heels. Now that's just flavor text. It doesn't make any difference. Let's take a look at the effect of spinning sweep. It's an encounter power. That means you can do it once every 5 minutes. It is a martial ability. That means that it's relying on your character's martial prowess. It is a weapon ability. That means that if your character is wielding a weapon, you get to add that weapon's magical bonus to your attack roll. It is a standard action, so you can do this with your standard action, kind of like from normal D&D. It uses melee weapons only. It targets a single creature. You will attack it using your strength. A ranged attack might use your dexterity. And then if you hit, it is going to do 1 die of weapon damage, plus whatever your strength modifier is, and you knock the target prone. So this whole ability is I do some damage. If I hit him, I do some damage and it knocks him prone. Now, it's called Spinning Sweep, and it's got this cool little flavor text here, but you can describe whatever you want. If I hit somebody with a hammer, maybe I'm not, you sweep your leg, it's a sweep the leg, Johnny, right? That doesn't matter. I could totally describe my character with a big ass hammer of saying, I bring my hammer up, I spin it around in a spinning sweep, and then I crush it into him with incredible momentum. I hit, he takes damage, and I drive him to the ground. If I'm using a polearm, maybe I attack him and I jam my polearm between his legs and kick him out, and the guy falls to the ground. The flavor can be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to be this, and it certainly doesn't have to be what is in the book, because guess what? What's in the book doesn't matter. It's there because, why not? But it's in italics. It's set apart from the rest of the meat and the potatoes of the ability. What matters is hit. 1 weapon damage, 1 die of weapon damage, knock target prone. That's it. That's what matters. A great example. I mean, we see elements of this in Pathfinder 2 already. Look at critical specialization with like hammers and flails and stuff. When you critically strike, they're knocked prone. It doesn't really explain to us how or why. We just figure it out. You crush people, they drop to the ground. You hit them and they drop. Like, you make it up. And guess what? You could change it from moment to moment. It could be whatever you want it to be, as long as the effect is the same, because that is what the game is balanced around. It's balanced around the idea of this effect, right? So that is kind of one of the most important parts here, is this effects. I should have labeled this, but I did not. Is this effects-based design, right? It is trying to tell you that, hey, guess what? We don't really actually care what you make your thing look like or do, as long as the effects matter. All right. So I really like that. Number 4. Okay, resources. All right. I don't want to give the wrong impression here, but most D20 games have a problem with resources. And the problem with resources is this. And if you've played Pathfinder 2 or you've played Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, I'm sure you have encountered this. And we'll even touch on this, but there's some infamous videos that sort of talk about this. In Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, your character, there's a couple different resources that your character is trying to manage, but I want to focus mostly on the combat powers for right now. The game is not. Here's the thing: does 4th edition have a lot of combat powers in it? Yes, just like every other edition of D&D from forever until the end of time. Okay. Most of the game is about combat. We know that. It doesn't mean it's the only thing, and it certainly is not something that's unsupported. In fact, with the introduction of skill challenges in 4th edition, I would argue that 4th edition was the edition of D&D that is the most supportive of non-combat things of all time. So in a sense, 4th edition, not only did it focus on combat, it's also the edition that focused the most on not combat. It gave more attention and focus to non-combat actions and structure and encounter design than any edition since or before. 100%. The only game that I've seen come close to it in the D20 sense is Pathfinder 2 in the GMG with the victory point system. And anybody who's played 4th edition can tell you that the Pathfinder 2 victory point system is very, very reminiscent of 4th edition skill challenge system. Now, you may like that, you may not like it, but the point is they were giving you the support that you needed in order to be able to do that. So I don't know. I want to make sure that this makes sense, but I don't want to get too distracted here, and create something that's confusing. In 4th edition, you have 3 main types of powers. You have at-wills, you have encounters powers, and you have daily powers. Now, if you've played Pathfinder 2, these are should be very, very familiar to you. At-wills are kind of like your cantrips, right? You can use them as often as you'd like. Encounter powers are like your focus spells. You can use them in a fight, and then after the fight, you get them back. And then daily spells are like your slots, like your spell slots from a caster. Okay? You use them once, they're gone for the day. The issue is that in Pathfinder 2 and D&D 5th edition, typically martial characters, not spellcasters, okay, essentially only have at-will abilities, right? Pathfinder 2, you have Hunted Shot, you have dual slice, you have power attack, you have megaton strike, you have, whatever. Every ability that a martial character has, and in 5th edition, right, you have great, I'm going to get it wrong a little bit, you have great weapon mastery, or polearm mastery, or great weapon something. You get these abilities, usually gained through feats or something like that, a class feat or a general feat. And the idea is you could just do this all the time. Okay. And that makes a certain amount of sense for us, right? Because it's not a magical ability, right? My character with dual slice, take care of Pumpkin. My character with dual slice is able to just dual slice for anything, forever, because why not? The problem is when you do that, and if you've played 5th edition for any length of time, if you've played 4th edition for any length of time, Pathfinder 2nd edition for any length of time, you will know that there are certain feats or powers that are just your best ones. I played a fighter in Pathfinder 2nd edition. Dual slice is very, very good. You get it from the very beginning of the game. It says you can attack with both of your weapons. You get a -2, but it's 2 actions. You don't get map. You just get -2/-2. If you're using 2 not agile weapons or whatever. And if they are agile, if one of them is agile, it's -0/-0. So you're getting 2 basically 0 map attacks. It's fantastic. There's no restriction on it. You can use it every round forever. And guess what? A lot of times you will, because that's what the best option for you to do is, right? You're just going to do the best thing over and over and over and over again. And yes, of course, there are going to be instances and times where you don't do that thing. But given the opportunity and given the choice, you are just going to do the same thing over and over and over again. Now, I know that Taking 20 did a video about this and about talking about the rotations and how the game felt like it was pretty spammy at time. I'm saying dual slice. I'm sorry. I meant double slice. It's a fighter power or fighter feat level 1 double slice. I keep saying dual slice, double slice. So 4th edition came in and said, guess what? Whether you're a spellcaster or whether you're a martial character, you are going to get these. You're going to get these encounter abilities as well. And you're going to get these daily abilities as well. And you are going to get some really cool attacks. But guess what? You can't do them every round for all time. You can only use them once a fight, or you can only use them once a day. And this at the time, and even today, makes people's heads explode. Because they said, no, it's martial, it's not magical. There should be no reason why I can't just keep spinning and sweeping forever. And you know what? They're not entirely wrong. I get it. It is a gamist thing. Now, the game, even the book itself, tries to explain why a martial power, which are called exploits in the game, by the way, might only be usable once per fight. Because, they might say something like, it's not every, the opportunity to catch your opponent off guard and knock them prone isn't something that literally happens, every 3 seconds, right? That's something that might only come up once or twice a fight. So you have to take that opportunity. And once you've taken that opportunity, the people aren't going to get tricked again, or you might not get that opportunity again. Or it might say that some of these abilities are very taxing and very demanding on the fighter. And they're, look at this bit, brute strike, right? Level 1 daily power. And it says, you shatter armor and bone with a single ringing blow. Okay. And this, when it hits, does triple weapon damage, right? Ton of damage, three dice of damage at level 1. It also, by the way, has this reliable keyword, which means that if you miss with this power, you actually get to keep it and use it again. But like, you can only use this once a day. Why? Because swinging that hard and connecting and hitting somebody, that takes a lot out of you.
Make it tipped $5.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for being entertaining and scratching the TTRPG itch that isn't met by the popular games.
Yeah, Mike. I mean, definitely something I want to do more often. And, I want to keep showing support and love for, the mainstream games. I'd even like to do more 5th edition and 1D&D streams if we can find the time for them. But, I do want to talk about some of these other games as well, newer and older. So thank you very much. I appreciated that. So at the end of the day, though, the most important thing about this is characters, no matter the class in 4th edition, have to play the resource game, right? And the resource game, I think, is really fun because a daily power is something you only get once per day. Duh. And so when you have a daily power, you're always asking yourself this question, right? Is this the fight where I am going to use this big power, right? Because you might be having several combats a day. The game assumes that you're going to have several combats a day, and the game supports that pretty well. But I can only do one brute strike a day. It's a big, huge damaging attack. And so I could use it in any of those fights, but I can only use it once per day. So I have to be asking myself, is this the fight where I'm going to use kind of my super special secret technique and do a bunch of damage? Now, remember, it's still an RPG. You get choices, right? Your character might not have brute strike. Your character might have villain's menace, right? And again, you only get this once a day. It's a daily power. It's this gray bar. Okay. This ability doesn't hit for as hard. Okay. It hits, it does double weapon damage, but you get a +2 bonus to attack rolls and a +4 bonus to damage rolls against that target until the end of the fight. Okay, till the end of the encounter. And by the way, even if you miss with this strike, this villain's menace, you still get a +1 to hit and a +2 to damage until the end of the fight. So clearly this is something that you don't want to just throw on some, weak little creature, right? You want to save this for that big, bad, monster. Or maybe the party gets in trouble and you go, I need to pull this out. Like, I was saving this, but this is the time to use it. So daily powers give you this really, really fun resource game of managing, do I want to use this pretty powerful resource? And that's it for the day. But there's another resource game, right? There's the encounter resource game. Because as we said before, encounter powers, kind of like focus spells from Pathfinder 2, you get your encounter powers back every fight. So that means that in when I go into an encounter or a combat as a fighter, I'm going to have access to something like this power, Rain of Blows, okay? I become a blur of motion, raining down a series of blows against my opponent. If I hit, I get to do damage, and then I can attack a secondary target, right? But only if I'm using a light blade, a spear, or a flail, and I have a dexterity 15 or higher. So this is much, much more about like having a kind of a quick moving fighter. Now I could use this every fight. So I probably should, and I probably would like to. So the thing with encounter powers is we know we're going to use it in the combat. Is this the round that I want to use this power, right? Rain of Blows, maybe I should, depending on what the fight looks like, depending what the tactical layout of the fight is, maybe this is something that I do right off the bat, right? Maybe, now look at our Rain of Blows here, okay? It could potentially attack 2 targets. So if we don't have 2 targets that are near each other, well, this is not the round for me to use Rain of Blows. I'm going to be waiting. I'm going to be looking. I'm going to be seeing if a party member is going to put 2 people close together, because now I can go in and I can do my Rain of Blows and I can get the best value out of that, right? Look at this one below it, Sweeping Blow. Rain of Blows is all about having like a spear or a blade. Sweeping Blow is all about having an axe or a flail or a heavy blade. Look at this. It's a close burst 1. That means your character basically literally kind of spins in a circle and hits every enemy in the burst that you could see. So if your character was completely surrounded on all sides on a 5x5 grid, right, you'd be attacking 8 people with Sweeping Blow. But if you were adjacent to only 1 monster, you'd only be attacking 1 monster. So clearly Sweeping Blow is better if my character can, get surrounded, or at least get 3 or 4 enemies next to me. So I'm probably not going to use this on the first round unless all the enemies are grouped up. I run into the middle of them and then I spin around, spinning to win. But if it's the first round and they're kind of spread out, I probably want to wait. And if my allies have the ability to push opponents or pull opponents and move them around, which a lot of powers in 4th edition have, then maybe they can work together to put 3 or 4 of monsters in one group. And then my character can come in and do the Sweeping Blow and hit all 3 or 4 of them. And by the way, remember what we said about mark. Every time my fighter makes an attack roll against a target, whether I hit or miss, they become marked by that fighter, getting a penalty to attack anybody else and potentially suffering an attack of opportunity if they do anything. Sweeping Blow is going to allow me to mark 3 or 4 or 5 monsters in one single swing of my axe. So in a way, what looks like an offensive power can also still tie back into my character's core job, which is defender, which is to maintain control of the battlefield and keep the people focused on me instead of my allies. So I really enjoy how the resource games work for the powers. But the other thing I really enjoy about the resource games are healing surges. And again, there's no getting around it. I mean, you can try to come up with some sort of plausible in-game reason, a simulation, a verisimilitude that tells you why healing surges exist. And I'm sure there are some probably pretty good explanations out of there. But for my money, healing surges exist because they make the game work better. And I don't know if everybody knows how healing surges work, so I want to talk about them. So a healing surge is the number of healing surges you get. It's a daily resource, and it is determined by your class and your constitution score. We can see here for our fighter that they have healing surges per day is 9 plus your constitution modifier. All right. So in our case, our fighter, let's say that their constitution was a 14. So if their constitution was a 14, for starters, actually, you know what? We're going to make the constitution 15 to make it really easy. No, wait, I'm going to make it something different to make it even easier. Help me out here. 17. Okay. We're going to give our person constitution of 17. Okay. That's a +3 modifier. So first things first, we can see above this that the hit points at first level is 15 plus your constitution score, not modifier, score. So our hit points at level 1 are going to be our constitution score, which is 17, plus 15. And so our character has 32 hit points at level 1. And right off the bat, you should notice something about 4th edition characters. They start pretty proficiently. I've heard a lot of people say about 5th edition, level 1 and 2 are sort of training wheel levels. And the game really starts at level 3. Kind of this, 4th edition, your character is starting off as kind of a badass, right? So our hit points are 32, and these work very much the same as you would expect in a game of Dungeons & Dragons. When your hit points go to 0, your character becomes unconscious. You start to make death saving throws. And if you fail enough of them, you die, right? So hit points work pretty much the same. All right. But you'll see below this, we have another thing in our character profile, say healing surges per day, 9+ constitution modifier. So we know that we have these hit points, but we also have these healing surges. Okay. So our healing surges is 9+ our constitution modifier. Well, our constitution modifier is 3. So we have 12 healing surges per day. So the last thing that we need to calculate, this isn't part of your character, this is a standard part, these are part of the standard rules of your character sheet, is what's called your healing surge value. And that is quite simply 25% of your hit points. So our hit points are 32, so that means that our healing surge value is 8. Now, as we go up in level and we gain more and more hit points, our healing surge value will increase. It will always be 25% of whatever our maximum hit points are. Okay? So our value of our healing surge is 8, and we have 12 healing surges per day. What does that mean? Well, it's pretty simple. In 4th edition, when your character heals, whether it's because of you're taking a rest. Well, okay, we'll talk about this in a couple ways. There is no need for a medicine check or anything like that. In 4th edition, once your character is out of a combat, it's kind of, again, there's a lot of DNA here in 5th edition, okay? In 5th edition, we'll start with 5th edition. In 5th edition, we know this, that if you take a short rest, okay, this is 5e. I'm talking about 5e, 5th edition. A short rest, which is about 1 hour. Okay, then you can spend your hit dice to recover hit points. Okay? Quark, you mentioned catching a second wind in Star Wars Saga Edition. Quark, that is exactly where this came from. Star Wars Saga Edition, which is one of the best D20 games of all time. This is 100% a port of that ability. Exactly, Quark. So in 5e, you can spend your hit dice after a short rest, which takes 1 hour of your character basically just kind of hanging out. And then you can roll those hit dice and you get back some hit points. Okay, that's 5e. Okay. In 4e, you can take a short rest after a fight or whenever, which is approximately 5 minutes. It's not exact, but basically it's enough to just catch your breath, take a quick breather. And you can spend a healing surge to recover your healing surge value in hit points. So for us, that means 8. Okay? So that means that if a fight was over and our character had been reduced to essentially 0 hit points or 1 hit point, after the fight, after just a few minutes, our character could spend 4 healing surges, and they would get back 8, 8, 8, 8. They'd be at 100% hit points. Okay, so that means that our character is capable of healing themselves to full from 0 or 1 hit point 3 times per day on their own. But wait, here's where it gets weird. I should preface this by saying there are abilities, mostly from people like clerics or warlords, who have the ability, they have powers, they're like the healers, right, of the game. They can let your character spend one of these healing surges, and usually they also give you a bonus to the amount of hit points that you recover, they can let you do this even in a combat, even without taking a short rest. They can, say a protective prayer over you or shout a word of encouragement, an inspiring word. And that ability will allow your character to use a healing surge and, heal the person. So that's great. Here's where people, again, lose their minds. In 4th edition, you must spend a healing surge to heal. If your character is out of healing surges, healing potions don't heal you anymore. Clerics' spells of healing don't heal you anymore. With a caveat, clerics are pretty special and sweet. Clerics actually get a couple of powers that they get, like exclusively almost, that let people heal on a virtual healing surge. It's like not only do they provide the healing, they provide the healing surge sort of free of charge. But for the most part, if your character runs out of healing surges, your character, even if they drank 18,000 healing potions, they would gain no benefit from them. Even if a cleric cast 1,000,000 healing words on you, you would cover no hit points. You must have a healing surge available to spend in order to heal. Because whenever you heal, you subtract the healing surge, you get your healing surge value, which is 8 for our character with 32 hit points. And in certain instances, some things like healing potions or cleric or warlord's special healing powers will give you a bonus. It'll be like, hey, you heal 8 plus a d6, or you heal 8 plus 2d6, right? Very cool. You're getting more bang for your buck. Having a cleric or a warlord around is really sweet. But if you don't have a healing surge value, that's it. You're done. So you need to manage these healing surge values. You need to manage your healing. It's not infinite. There's no cure light wounds. And by the way, 4th edition came after 3rd edition. And 3rd edition was the addition of cure light wounds wand spam. And if you go back, and they understood this, okay, we just finished our Northern Reaches, okay, campaign. Pathfinder 2, I don't even know, 75, 85 players, a lot of them playing several times a week. They very quickly realized that and by the way, this is even with medicine in the game, that takes too long. That takes 10 minutes. Even if you have continual recovery, it takes 10 minutes between medicine checks. When you're high level, a level 1 heal scroll is like 3 gold. Okay? It's almost nothing to a high level Pathfinder 2 character. Our high level Pathfinder 2 characters had dozens and dozens, in some cases near 100, level 1 heal scrolls. And they would just drop 7 or 8 of them, or 9 of them right after a fight. So it would only take like 1 minute to heal somebody all the way back up to full. And that way they could preserve the 10-minute long buffs like heroism. So they didn't have to waste a high level heroism like a heroism 6 or a heroism 9, okay? They wanted to spend those. They didn't want to lose those, so they used scrolls to heal. It's very similar to Cure Light Wounds wand spam. I've heard from 5th edition that there are similar problems with, some sort of crazy druid or cleric spell or something like that lets people walk into it and they can heal for 1,000,000 hit points. The point is, Pathfinder 2, in 3rd edition D&D, in 5th edition D&D, the idea that your character might run out of hit points kind of is irrelevant, either because the game lets you just heal to full anyways, or because the game doesn't expect you to be able to heal to full, but there's a magical item, trick, or catch that you can do where you get yourself a bunch of wands of Cure Light Wounds, or you get yourself a bunch of level 1 heal scrolls, and you just spam them, making the entire drama or tension of, Are we running out of time? Are we running out of energy? Are we running out of hit points? Wasted. So in 4th edition, now I'll be the first to, again, but what does that mean? Well, again, the game leaves that to you. Maybe healing surge values represent, your character's innate ability to recover their bodily energy. Maybe your character's a super being, and this is how many, your battery charge. Maybe it just represents how much beatdown your character can take. And even if you're being magically healed, your character can still only recover so much in a given day. People hated this. They still hate it today, but they hated it. They really did. It was a real problem for people because they wanted a one-to-one connection between the game world and the game mechanics. If I couldn't explain something in the fiction, then I didn't want it to be part of my game. And a lot of people said that mechanics like healing surges felt too much like video game mechanics, which is funny because no video game mechanic would ever use this, by the way. They would just use normal hit points. This mechanic exists specifically to allow the consequences of the player's action to have meaning over the course of several fights without creating a death spiral mechanic. And that is what's so important to understand. And again, I say this before, and I mean this with all due respect. If someone doesn't like 4th edition, I respect that decision. But if we had a conversation and you told me why you didn't like 4th edition, there's about a 80% chance that you're just wrong and you haven't thought about it and you don't actually know what you're talking about. Healing surges exist because it is more interesting and it is more fun and it does create a game design advantage when we can assume that after a fight, okay, so we're in a fight, this is fight 1, okay, and we start at 100% hit points, okay, and after the fight, let's say we go down to 25% hit points, okay, that's a tough fight. Now, when I am trying to balance fight 2, it can be really difficult as a game designer and to create a balanced experience if I don't know if my players, PCs, who are going to be in that fight, are going to be at 100% experience, 100% HP when they enter the fight, or are they going to be at half, or are they going to be at 25%? I don't know. Okay, I don't know. Now, this created some problems in older editions of the game, and Pathfinder 2 understood this. And that is why Pathfinder 2 said, look, it's a lot easier and it's a better experience for everybody if we just assume that the character is going to enter the fight at 100% experience, 100% hit points. And you know what? They're right. It does make the game balance a lot easier and it does make the experience a lot more fun. The problem is that if your character goes to 100% experience, I keep saying experience, hit points, if your character goes to 100% hit points down to 25, or maybe they go to 10%, or maybe you did really, really, really well that fight. You played well, you made strong defensive decisions, and you only dropped down to 70% of your hit points. If all of those things lead to the same thing, which is you're back at 100%, you're back at 100% hit points in the next fight, and you're not down anything. You're not down any resources. Maybe you're down some charges from your Cure Light Wounds wand if you're playing Pathfinder 1. Or maybe you're down some heal scrolls. Or maybe you're down some 20 minutes or 30 minutes because of medicine checks in Pathfinder 2. Or maybe you're down some silly broken ability or spell from 5th edition D&D. The point is, you know that whether you go to 10% life or 70% life or 25% life, as long as your character isn't dead at the end of a fight, that your character will be at 100% for the next fight, and it won't cost you a thing. But in 4th edition D&D, it did cost you a thing. The character, the fighter, who had a bad fight and went down to 10% hit points is going to need to spend more healing surges to get back up to full. The character who played well and only took 1 or 30% might only spend a single healing surge, and they start the next fight at 100%. Now, in both instances, we get the fun and the balance and the monster and encounter-based design trade-offs and the advantages of starting our fight at 100%, but our character had the 12 healing surges, and now they're down to 9. And then maybe after the next fight, they're down to 7, and then they're down to 5. There is a sense that the game is pressuring you and putting this pressure on you to be able to accomplish what you need to accomplish in a given day. Quark says, seems like healing surges would reduce the gaming day even more. Quark, you're not wrong. That being said, in my experience, almost every person who plays 5th edition or 5th edition or Pathfinder 2 typically only has between 1 to 3 encounters per day anyways. So I think that the expectation in 4th edition is actually that you'll fight 4 to 5 encounters per day, which is already more than pretty much what most people play anyways. So, this resource element, I think, is just incredibly important, because it means that the choices that you're making and the decisions that you're taking, and by the way, I have only scratched the surface. I could talk about how, wizards and rogues and clerics, they have less healing surges, and because they have less hit points, their healing surge value is lower, which means that if the fighter is the person taking the damage, it's actually better for your party, because a fighter taking damage isn't as problematic from a party resource perspective, because their healing surge value is worth more. I'm again, this is getting really complicated and going down the design rabbit hole, but the point is that if the fighter takes 8 points, here, we'll do it really simple. If the fighter has a healing surge value of 8 and the wizard has a healing surge value of 4, then if the fighter takes 8 points of damage, it's only going to cost them 1 healing surge to get back up to full. If the wizard, whose healing surge value is 4, takes 8 points of damage, they're going to have to spend 2 healing surges to get to full. So the game actually rewards the party who has a fighter or a paladin or a warden or a sword mage, or that might have been all the defenders, who takes the hits for the party. It actually benefits you to have your defenders taking the damage. I saw a yellow question. I'm sorry if I missed one earlier. I've been, writing and reading PDFs, so I apologize for that. If you do have a question or something and you want to specifically have me answered or call you out, feel free to the super chat or to tip. Again, when I do these 4E or Legend of the Five Ring streams, I expect what I get, which is, not a lot of money, but, we're doing it for fun. And we're doing it because we care. DM Gary, combats can take a long time if you use old math. I guess it wasn't questions. Combat can take a long time if you use old math, unoptimized characters, and especially if you don't resolve the combat when the dramatic question has been answered. I don't know why my thing made that yellow, but DM Gary, I completely agree with you. The old math needed updated. Characters that suck can take a while to grind through characters or monsters. And I also agree that all versions of Dungeons and Dragons, 5th edition and 4th edition, benefit greatly from a version of morale or some sort of moment when basically you say the enemies are done, right? Like, there are still monsters on the battlefield, but the tension of this battle is resolved. We have reached the peak. We have crossed the other side. It's no longer a question of, are we going to win? But simply, it's guaranteed, and it's just cleanup. We used to call it cleanup. And if cleanup only takes 1 round, it's not that bad. In fact, it could be a fun little victory lap for your players as they sort of, deal with this. But if cleanup ends up taking 2 rounds or 3 rounds, it can get really, really dragging on. And, I think anything that you do, whether it's a GM, hand wave, and say, it's a fight, you've got an ogre boss, and then there's like 2 goblin archers in the back, and then there's 2 goblin like sneaky rogues who are up front, and it's this really crazy combat and shit's going on. It's wild, and one of the goblin, sneaky guys, rogues, gets killed early on, but then the big ogre boss is in the middle of the party. The party takes him out and takes out the other sneaky goblin. The 2 archer goblins, they just run away, they flee. I don't know. If they were undead, maybe like when the one creature dies, everything else turns to dust, right? Like the power that was animating them. If you have a bunch of elementals and then like a caster, when the caster dies, the elemental summons dissipate and they go back to the elemental chaos. You can, again, why? Leave it up to the GM. Leave it up to the DM. That's why we have a DM. But you don't need to answer those questions. The group has won the fight, and can move on from there. Sean says 4E having tons of errata was also not so great. Books became nearly worthless. Very, very legitimate complaint. We've been talking about the pros here. I have a lot of pros. We can continue to talk about them, but I do want to make sure that people know that there are some cons to 4th edition. And I think that one of them is, yes, errata. The other one is, the GSL and, it's no support from Wizards of the Coast. And GSL is a gaming system license. Basically, 4th edition was not released under the OGL, that thing that you see in the back of basically every D20 book. Because 4th edition, the people, the corporate overlords at Wizards of the Coast, now that they own D&D, Hasbro, now that Hasbro owned Wizards of the Coast, they really, really didn't want to do what happened with 3rd edition, where a bunch of people came in and basically stole their IDs and, their IP and basically published their own version of Player's Handbook. And people didn't have to buy the Player's Handbook or the Dungeon Master Guide because everybody else was creating their own version of the Player's Handbook because the open gaming license was that open. So the GSL was much more restrictive. People did not publish for it. There is no SRD officially. And Wizards of the Coast has sort of turned a blind eye to 4E. So that's a big con. Errata, DM Gary, are you aware of what happened with 4E VTT? If we're talking about the murder-suicide, then yes, I am. I am very aware of that. Actually met that guy at a Gen Con. We won't get down into that, but you worked on that project and it's rough. Oh, okay. Well, you put that one on the cons list. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, we've been going to Gen Con pretty much nonstop since the early 2000s. So, definitely. Yeah. I mean, we were all in. I mean, we thought it was really great. So great to have you here. What could have been, Gary, what could have been? I think having a 4E VTT for that would have just been, as you're familiar with that 2007 Gen Con press release, 4E, the system was only like half of the announcement. The other half of the announcement was, and we're going to do a VTT and we're going to have this digital tools set. And obviously we got D&D Insider and, the compendium, but, obviously the other part of it did not manifest in that. I think that hurt a lot of people. But errata is something that you can, look at either positively or negatively. Positively, because 4th edition was committed to, they thought, hey, more people are playing digital now than ever. And you know what? We are going to listen to the feedback that we are getting from our community. We're going to look at what people are taking in our community. They basically took, guess what? They took a Magic the Gathering style approach to dealing with errata. Magic the Gathering has always relied on digital data, whether it was from Moto or now Arena, to understand what players were playing with and what percentage of characters were taking this card, or in this case, this feat. and they were paying attention to it, and they really tried their best, if something was powerful, to fix it. And in some instances, they even banned certain abilities or epic destinies or paragon paths. I think that it shows an interesting commitment to wanting the game to be the best it can be. We know with 5th edition and we know with Pathfinder 2 that there are many instances where you look at something and you say, why haven't they fixed this? Why have they errated this? And a lot of times it's because they understand that it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. And not everybody, people do not like their books to become, vaporware, or just to become useless. And I think that is a reasonable reason to say that is a con, is because it can be a bit tricky at times to know what is the official book. Now, of course, you could play it. It's not like these things don't work without the errata. Of course, they work. But if you want to play with the most up-to-date, most correct version, then there is errata. I guess it's one of the advantages of the edition being done, is that all the errata is published. And I agree with you, Anthony. Errata is not as bad in the digital age, but this was 2008, 2009, and that could have been potentially problematic as well. Plus, like SC Voldo said, you could just choose to ignore that. There were plenty of errata. SC Voldo played with us in our 4th edition campaigns, and there was plenty of errata that we looked at and we said, this isn't a problem for our game. We like the power or the ability the way it is, and we're just going to choose to ignore it. Let's see. One of the things they did with keywording was the idea that they categorized some things, they could change the category and minimize errata. That is also true. I mean, in some instances, there was just problems with powers and things of that nature. I don't know if 4E was OGL, Sean. It's possible that we could see something very, very different right now. So Fake asks a question at Night's the Last Call. What parts of 4E did you not like? So these were some of the cons, but what were some of the things that I did not specifically like? Okay. So one of them, and again, this is a problem with Pathfinder 2 as well. Now for some people, this is an absolute win. For me, it could be problematic sometimes. In Pathfinder 2, we are used to that you add your level to pretty much all of your things, your skills, your saves, your armor class, your attack roll, you add your level. Well, guess what? 4E did this first, except it was half your level. So it wasn't as dramatic, but it was still there. And what this meant was that creatures that were significantly higher level in the party were essentially invincible because their armor classes, their defenses, their fort, their reflex would just be too high for a low level characters to deal with. Now, 4th edition tried to solve this by using the solo rules. And the opposite direction, if a character or if a monster was really low level than you, then it would just be a joke. So 4th edition tried to solve this using the minion rules. And these worked for the most part. But there are some subtle differences about this that I think can be problematic because the game expects you to be leveling. It expects you to be putting your scores into stats. And so the creature's armor classes increase linearly with level as you go through the course of the game. And so, you might start the game off and let's say your character is predominantly strength focused, and you have a +4 bonus to strength and you have a +2 bonus to dex, and you're adding 0 because of your level, and you don't have a magic weapon, okay? And you're proficient, which adds 3. Does not scale like it does in Pathfinder 2. If you're proficient, you add 3 or 2. It depends on the weapon. Anyways, point is, at level 1, our character has a +7 to hit with their strength-based attacks, and they have a +5 to hit with their dex-based attacks. Pretty good. It's a little bit of a difference, but it's not huge. And the creatures you're fighting might be, AC 16. So, we have a pretty dang good chance of hitting with our strength-based attacks, but our dex-based attacks are going to sort of fall behind. Now, cut to many levels later. Let's say that we are now level 24. Okay. Well, now our strength might be something like, +7. And our half level is +12. And we have a +4 magic weapon. And we have a +3 from proficiency. And so now we have a +26 to hit. But with our bow, our dex didn't get improved as much. So our dex is only +3. We still get to add +12. We don't have a +4 bow. We have like a +2 bow or a +1 bow. And we still get the +3 from proficiency. And okay, this is +20. So this is a 6-point difference. So the game, like Pathfinder 2, is balanced around this value. It is balanced around your +26. It is not balanced around your +20. And so while at the beginning of the game, we could reasonably attack and hit with our bow, by the end of the game, it becomes damn near impossible for you to be able to be essentially good with both. It's kind of what it comes down to. Now, this is a problem in Pathfinder 2 as well, big time. It's pretty. It's a problem that comes in when the math is balanced around sort of a linear progression, because if you don't keep up with, and that linear progression tends to be tied to your character's, the assumption of your character making the best choice. And that means that, you could, lose track of it. Now, William Brandis points out, technically this is a problem in all D20. It's just that 3rd edition is way more whack with ACs. That is exactly right, William Brandis, because at level 18 in Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition, my BAB might be +18. My strength could be +7. I have a +4 sword. Okay. And it's like, okay, yeah, wow. I have a +29 to hit with my sword. And with my bow, I have a +18 for my BAB. I have a +3 for my dex, and my bow is only +2. I have a +23 for my bow. So it's still a 6-point difference. But the monster I'm attacking is AC 22. Right? So the balance in 3rd edition is not so much about the top line level. It's about, that 3rd attack or 4th attack as your base attack bonus comes down off of full attack. So the character in 3rd edition is able to still hit once, maybe even twice with their bow. Are they going to be able to hit 3 or 4 times like the sword wielding, you with your sword, which you're more quote unquote specialized in? No. I also argue that in 3rd edition, they did not balance the math against this hyper optimal character, which most of us ended up having anyways in 3rd edition. They kind of guessed it. And so it was very easy to be way beyond what the characters, what the monsters' armor classes were, fairly easy. Now, again, this is something I personally don't always love. Don't get me wrong. There are times where I think it's cool that you get to add this bonus and that, it feels like you're getting better and stronger at these things. So I guess I just don't necessarily love that because of the way that the math and the scaling works. It's like I'm getting worse with my bow. DM Gary, did you play at epic level? Yes. And see the reverse being also true for player defenses. A sorcerer getting hit in the reflex at level 1 gets hit on 9, and at 20, yes, gets hits on a 2. Yeah, the nads. Okay, so DM Gary, again, more cons. There are some math scaling issues in the game. And again, I mean, we're just talking here, people. We're just being honest. And in some instances, they tried to fix these with feats. And they can sometimes end up feeling a little bit like a feat tax, because it feels like you're pretty much required to take them. So in what Gary is talking about is that you might end up with a very your reflex defense is really, really low. And so in later books, they understood that the way that they designed the game did not keep pace with maybe what you would expect them to be. And so they created, it's a epic tier feat. Here we go. Yes. So they created these feats specifically to address the AC issue here. They are called Epic Fortitude, Epic Reflex, and Epic Will. So these feats exist. They give you an unbelievable, now you have to be 21st level, which is the beginning of Epic tier. You have to, these give you a huge bonus to one of your saves. And the idea of these is to sort of, now obviously you could use it to make one of your really great saves even absurd. But it's also fairly common that it's acknowledged that this is sort of a way that if one of your saves is really garbage, this is a way to fix it. And probably the best example of it is also in this book, which is called Weapon Expertise. This is probably one of the most common house rules in 4th edition, which is to just give everybody, there it is, which is just give everybody this feat for free. And not even worry about the weapon group. Just give everybody a free. You get a +1, it goes to a +2 at 15, and it goes to a +3 at 25. You could also probably just do it as a +1 at 5, a +2 at 15, and a +3 at 25. The game still works without these feats. I cannot, I cannot argue this enough. But yes, Gary points out weapon expertise and improved defenses are very common, and that's just because they fix a little bit of the scaling. But I do agree that it's kind of like Pathfinder 2, right? Like if your character, if your character at level 20 is supposed to hit on a 10 or higher, but maybe, I don't know, maybe you never got an Apex item, right? So your ability stat isn't +7. Does that mean your character is useless and you should throw it away? No, of course not, right? It just means that, on paper, it's not as perfect as it should be. And that's okay. These games are messy anyways. So I don't really view that as a huge con, but it is it is a little bit of a con. But yeah, that is, those are probably my main. Okay, so this is a philosophical question. It's a philosophical question. And 4E answers it, by the way, really well. 4E has extensive rules in the DMG about how to handle improvisational ideas and, how to...
Rick has tipped $10, just supporting the channel.
Rick! Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. Thanks for showing up. Love it. Rick, I don't know if you saw that, but we're going to do the continuation of Quest for the Frozen Flame on the 13th of December, not the 6th. Again, we thought everybody was planning on that, us wrapping it, obviously, last Tuesday. And so some people had some plans on the 6th. So we're just going to do a regular live stream this week on the 6th, but then it might be another long one like this one, but on the 13th, we are going to do Quest for the Frozen Flame. Yeah, so 13th. Don't worry, Rick. I'll put a post in there. So going back to it, 4th edition. This was a me problem. Okay, so this came out in 2008. So that was 14 years ago, right? I was 26. I guess older, or I was old, but I wasn't old enough. But this is before I played. I mean, we'd played Mutants and Masterminds, which is D20. We had played Earth Dawn, which is very different, but it's ultimately still kind of a fantasy role-playing, genre games. The point is, I had my head up my ass, and I had a problem with 4th edition, and I still have this problem with 2nd edition Pathfinder, where I get stuck in a loop sometimes where I understand that the game is the challenge of the game, is the challenge of the TTRPG, Is it the game elements? Okay, or is it the fictional mechanical interaction? All right. And, to put it another way, how are you supposed to beat a TTRPG? Are you supposed to beat it through application of game elements, or Quark?
Quark12000 tipped $5.
Quark, thank you very much for that $5 tip. Appreciate you. You didn't include a message, but we love your support. We love having you. Thanks for being here. Glad that hopefully you're getting something about this. I'm sure, Quark, if you have any questions, you let us know on the Discord. That goes for anybody. If this conversation isn't enough for you and you want more, we have a pretty extensive, our Discord is not just Pathfinder 2. In fact, today there was a group playing Wicked Ones, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse game. We've got Star Trek Advanced. We've got OSC games going on, which reminds me, my OSE stuff from the Kickstarter finally came. Sweet. Look at that. Excited to try it out, to open it up. So if you're looking for more conversations about 4th edition, old school essentials, which are pretty much on polar opposite sides of the spectrum, check us out, patreon.com/nicelesscall. You can sign up for our Patreon, $5 level, $10 level, and just come in and hang out. We actually, DM Gary, you want to come on our GM, but you don't want to pay to join. It is pay only, but we actually have a couple people who have already started playing with the Foundry module, and we actually have a couple people who are going to try to run some games. I think this month. In fact, actually, I think I'm on the docket to run a 4E game as well. But Gary, given your experience, maybe we could have you come on and as a sort of a gift. Damian Williams says, give us a flash surprise review. I haven't even opened them up yet, but I gotta say, I love the digest size. I love the slip kit, the cover that they come in. I love the art. So I'm very happy to get these onto the shelves. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of BX D&D anyways. My actual BX book is right here. But all right. So, but I'm excited to have it there, Mr. Williams. Happy it came. I was a little worried there for a second. Okay, so back to TTRPGs. How do you beat a TTRPG? All right, like how are you supposed to play it? How are you supposed to beat it? Are you supposed to beat it using the game elements? Now there's a skill in this. There's a chance, like as players, and I say this with love, but I have played RPGs before where you present a challenge and players will go, we'll just do this and this and this, and then it'll be destroyed. We beat the challenge. And they basically just like circumvent the game elements, and the entire game becomes essentially a sort of a workaround. You're almost skipping the game to play the game. So I understand that there's a certain amount of fun that comes from playing the game and playing the game within the context of the game's rules and mechanics. To beat the game on its own terms, using the abilities and magical items and what have you that the game provides to you. And while TTRPGs are always been a little bit about understanding sort of these creative, the ability to be creative and the ability to come up with novel solutions that a computer could never handle, which is why we have a dungeon master. There is something to be said about playing the game using the tools that are given to you and not always trying to sort of sneak a win, like, and I guess what it comes down to, it's like football. I'm not a football fan. And when I say football, I mean American football, right? The objective of football is, I throw the ball, I run the ball, we move the ball down the field, we score points by getting it into the end zone, okay? And that's the game. That's what the game's about. But, Kevin, we'll see you later. But, like, sometimes you watch on shows or in movies or whatever like that, right? Like the sneak play, right? Where, like, oh, the ball was never, they thought they snapped it, but they didn't. The center actually still has the ball, and he runs it in, or like the fake out punt. It's like the end of any movie, like Rookie of the Year, right? The kid who could throw really fast. It was a movie from the 90s. Anyways, he loses his arm in the finals and the World Series, and they have to kind of like be sneaky and cheat, and they win. It's not cheating, but they win, but not from being better at baseball, right? They win because they used their mind and they outsmarted him, and they faked him out, and he thought that he lost the ball, but it didn't actually have it. He just tagged him with it at the end. There's some appealing to that, but there's also I think a pride and a satisfaction that comes with beating the game on its own terms and using the game mechanics. The other way to think about TTRPGs is that it is simply a fictional, mechanical, interactive layer. And we are, together as a group, expressing an ongoing fictional state of a world, of a narrative, of a character, of multiple characters. And that narrative is ongoing, it's ongoing. And then sometimes we interact with that fictional mechanical elements, or fictional narrative with mechanical elements so that we can resolve unclear or uncertain things. This, by the way, is the exact way that Powered by the Apocalypse works. It's the way that Dungeon World and Monster Hearts and Thirsty Sword Lesbians and Apocalypse World and Blades in the Dark, they all work this way. Is the fiction comes first, and then mechanics enter as needed, suited to fit the fictional needs. 4th edition, and to a certain extent, Pathfinder 2nd edition, to me, personally, feel more like this type of game. They don't have to be. And I would even say that 4th edition, Pathfinder 2 does as well, but 4th edition, even more so than Pathfinder 2nd edition, gives you plenty of advice on how to actually do this. All right, there's a classic example in the DMG of the 4th edition Dungeon Master's Guide of, hey, I described a room and I described that there were like large, coal-filled braziers, with the sort of metal grates with the burning coals. And one of my PCs kicked one over. How should we roll that? How much damage should that do? And the game provides you with information on exactly how that would work. And that's amazing. And that's awesome. But sometimes, and this is again my issue, not the game's issue, it feels a little out of place because the game is so, it feels like that razzle-dazzle sneak play when the game is giving you all of these game elements already. And it starts to, and I'm going to do a bad job of explaining this, but 4th edition is designed. We talked about this at the beginning of the stream. 4th edition, a game like Blades in the Dark. We'll start with that. Blades in the Dark, okay, or Powered by the Apocalypse are what we would call fiction first gaming. In fact, these games go so far as to say, if you cannot describe it in the fiction, the mechanical move doesn't even occur. You can't, in Powered by the Apocalypse games, technically, you can't even take an action or a move. The only thing we can do is have a conversation about the fiction. And at some point, a move will trigger. It's not even like you do it. It triggers because of something that you said that you're doing inside of the description, right? And the fiction comes first. And if we can't figure out what is going on, then there is no mechanical effect. Whereas I think 4E is more of an effects first game. Now, I could, this is my sense on it. I don't know if Aaron is still here, but I'd like to get his thoughts on this. Let me give you a great example of this. Magic the Gathering, a game that hopefully most of you are familiar with. Magic the Gathering is an effects first game. In Magic the Gathering, if I have a sword, which is a type of card called equipment, I could pay 2 mana and I can equip that sword to a creature. Those are the only requirements. I pay 2 mana and I equip the sword to a creature, and then the creature gains the benefit of that sword. The creature could be a snake. The creature could be an intelligent shade of the color blue. The creature could be a snake who is already wielding 17 swords. The game doesn't care. You could pay 2 mana and you can give it a sword. Because that's what the effect says, right? To be clear, the way that 4E is described, that is the way that the game is designed. That doesn't mean you have to play with it that way. It doesn't mean it's the only way to play it that way. But it is certainly the way that the game is described. And there's a natural instinct in people and players to look at an ability or something like that and start thinking about ways, how would I use that ability if this were real? The classic example of this is like using something like Fireball or Produce Flame to light something on fire. And as we know from games like 4th edition and Pathfinder 2nd edition, the rules, they don't actually do that. But this is where I think you have to come, and this is sort of the modern day Derek approach, which is you have to be willing to throw that out the window. And you have to be willing to understand that sometimes, even while you're playing the game, sometimes it is an effects first game and the game elements are what are supposed to be being tested here. And sometimes it's a fiction first game and the fictional mechanical interaction is what is dominant in the game. And you have to be able to move back and forth between those two spaces. Does that create messiness sometimes? Does that create oddness and ambiguities? It does. It does sometimes. Now, William Brandis is quite right. This is no different than older versions of D&D. Combat was heavily described. It had rules for how you could attack and how you couldn't attack, and other things were open. Very true. I mean, if you read the original rule book from BX, it doesn't say you could do anything. So what does that mean? You can't do anything? Of course not. But when a game gives you a framework and it says, here are some powers and here are some abilities, or in Pathfinder 2's case, here are some feats or class abilities that let you light a firework or make a demolition charge. The game is also telling you, in a sense, this is how I expect for you to interact with that element in the game world. I expect you to be interacting with it through effects, not through the fiction. You know, and the example that we've used recently from Pathfinder 2 has been a demolition charge, which is, I think it's an alchemist class feature, but it's also, I think, on the demolitionist archetype. And it says you can take 1 to 4 bombs and you can put them on like a door or an object. And then from 30 feet away, you can blow them up. And then it'll actually do damage to that object. Now, that's because ordinarily in the rules of the game, bombs in...
Entheo tipped $3.
Thank you, Entheo. No, just a tip. Appreciate it. No shout out. Thank you very much. That's because in Pathfinder 2, bombs don't do damage to doors or objects at all. Just the tip. And that, as written, if I had a bunch of fire bombs, I could not use them to blow up a door. Like if you read the description of a firebomb, it does not do damage to objects. And this ability, this mechanical ability, changes the rules of the game for you.
Jason B tipped $10. I'll give you just the tip.
Damn it. Thank you, Jason B. Thank you, Entheo. And here's the end of the story. And again, now, why is it limited to 1 to 4 bombs? Because, hey, Jason.
Tipped $10. I've got to head out, but thanks for the full e-stream, Derek. Looking forward to learning more.
Thank you very much, Jason. Thank you very much, Jason. Both of you. Yeah, I mean, we'll keep talking about this. I mean, I want to talk about a lot of games. I mean, there's a lot of games out there. And here's the thing. Even if you have no interest in playing 4th edition, or you have no interest in playing Broken Compass or 7 Seas or Legend of the Five Rings, I still think it's worthwhile understanding role-playing games, because you're going to find things that you're going to want to steal or beg or borrow, or just, at least be inspired by, to take into your games and say, I don't like that game, but I liked that rule, or I liked that mechanic, or I like that idea. And that's something I think we could all benefit from. And I know that that's a big part of the way that I think about role-playing games. And I think it very much is an asset to have that kind of information. Yeah, exactly, Rick. Rick's talking about from our Quest for the Frozen Flames game, where I took a resource mechanic, which was itself taken from a different game, which was Battlestar Galactica, a board game. I brought that into my Pathfinder 2 game, and now Rick wants to take it and use it in Traveler. I think that's amazing. I think that's awesome. Rick, I would love to see how you would respond to a game of Scum and Villainy. I am curious. There's definitely some Traveler DNA there, and I would love to see what you would do with that. Phoenix Trinity, finally, I am strong. Uh-oh, did I miss something? I mean, I'll give it to you.
I am strong.
Is it possible that there was some increase or upgrade or something? Did I miss something? I don't know what I missed. I'm worried that maybe you got should there have been some sort of a notification? All right, hold a sec here. So thank you very much for that super chat. I'll take any opportunity I can to play that. No, okay, it was just you overspending? Yes. Okay, great. Well, you know what?
RPG!
Look at that.
RPG! RPG!
I'll take it.
RPG!
I love the overspending.
RPG!
Thank you, Phoenix. I love that. Just me overspending. Fantastic. Yeah, so DM says I may or may not have started recording a series called Beg, Borrow, Steal as my GMing tips. Yeah, I mean, that's, great GMs create, or good GMs create, great GMs steal. So when you look at Pathfinder 2's Demolition Charge, we understand how spells and abilities work in Pathfinder 2, which is, by default, they do not target objects. And this Demolition Charge changes the logic on that, and it lets you do that.
Frostjack tipped $5.
Thanks, Frostjack.
Off-topic question. What would the world look like if 4E and 5E switched places, chronologically? EA 5E's core rules come out 2007, 4 in 2014.
Yeah. Yeah, we can talk about that. All I want to say is this. Last thing I want to say about this. You either really like this or you don't. And, and I would say this. There's maybe a corollary to this, which is you really like this or you don't in combat, or not in combat. For reasons that I don't fully understand, and I don't pretend to know, many people, even probably myself, make a distinctive difference between the way that they interact, going back to this sort of fiction-first gaming and this sort of effects-based gaming, again, which is sort of itself derived from this idea of what has primacy, right? What is the principle determined? I mean, these games are run by people. We're always switching between them. But what is the primary driver of decision-making and rules adjudication? Is it the game elements, Or is it the fictional mechanical interaction? And in my experience, there's a lot of people out there who basically say in combat, it's this. Outside of combat, it's this. And they are fine with the rules being different, essentially, inside of combat instead of outside of combat. So going all the way back, I think 4th edition D&D gets a bad reputation for being a, quote, combat-only game. You can't play D&D in it. And that is 100% false. In fact, I would go so far as to say, as I was trying to say, that this game gave you more options to do outside of combat than any edition of D&D had prior, with the introduction of number 1. I can't believe I, by the way, completely flipped to this correct one. With number 1, skill challenges, and number 2, there are powers in the game. I'm gonna zoom in on this one. This is a paladin ability. Okay. By the way, you'll notice like paladin abilities are called prayers. Martial abilities are called exploits. Astral speech. You speak with such compelling conviction that others find it difficult to refute your beliefs and claims. It's a daily divine action, minor action, effect. You get a +4 bonus to diplomacy checks until the end of the encounter. So paladins have a power that does nothing. There's no bone mow in 4E. This is a power meant to be used outside of combat. It is a utility power that is designed to help you in a kind of like in a social encounter, dare I say, a social skill challenge. And in this case, it's going to help you throughout the entire encounter, because basically the paladin is filled with this, astral guidance from above and speaks with such divine authority and conviction that other people are just overwhelmed by the strength and power of their words. This is not a combat power. This is not a combat ability. And you might say, oh yeah, well, great. Well, that's a paladin. That's easy. Okay. Well, let's go take a look at the warlock. Okay. Right. We think of the warlock. The warlock is look at this. The darkness holds no terror for me, demon. I curse you now under the sign of ill omen. Right? They're a striker. They're designed to blow things up. But even they get a utility power. And their utility power is a little different than the paladin's utility power. Their utility power is used once per encounter. So it's not the entire encounter, but they can use it multiple times per day. They have a beguiling tongue. If you are a Fey warlock, you can channel the grace and glibness of your Fey patrons for but a short time, your voice gaining great power and eloquence. And you get a +5 bonus to either your next bluff, diplomacy, or intimidate check that you make during this encounter. Now, it's not the whole encounter like the astral speech of the paladin, but this ability is your warlock, which is fundamentally a blaster. I mean, the warlock is, they've got tons of abilities. They can curse a target so that they take a warlock's curse, and then they take extra damage anytime you hit them with one of your powers, and they're burning people with hellish rebukes and diabolic gasps and stuff. But they give them this ability to, have a really slick tongue, because they're a Fey warlock, and they're a little tricksy, and they can, manipulate people, and they can lie to people very easily. So the game, it supports these non-combat options and ideas. And, that I just think that is something that I think gets wholly overstated. I will say, I think the mistake that I made when I played 4th edition, when I was a younger man, if anything, is I was far too, dogmatic about what the rules said and what the rules did, especially in outside of combat. I think inside of combat, there's a certain sense to playing fair and following the rules. But I know that early on in my 4th edition game, I was a little bit more of a pain in the ass about making sure the rules be followed. Whereas by the time we'd been playing for over a year and we got into epic levels, I was having characters make an Arcana check and maybe lose a couple healing surges, and they were able to rip their home city, their metropolis city of Alestra, bound in the Feywild, an Eladrin metropolis, and rip it free from the ground and summon it up into the air like a flying city a la Dragonlance, in order to protect it from an invading army of demons and Fomorians. And that was just a skill check. Obviously, that's not in the book, but I was just doing that anyways. So the other thing, we're talking about utility powers here, and I really want to highlight, and to be fair, they're in Pathfinder 2, and they're also underutilized in Pathfinder 2 as well. This game, and if you've watched our spell series, you'll know that I have brought this up many times, is this idea of, I get that we need special rules and we need special restrictions on things like fireballs, right? But there are so many things that people want to do in D&D that don't necessarily need to be something that we have, tracked on them, right? And 4th edition had this incredible system called rituals. And the way rituals worked is you had to know the ritual. By the way, you didn't have to be a spellcaster to even know a ritual. Typically, you just needed to have the key skill. So if my totally normal fighter, if my fighter had the nature skill and had a feat called Ritual Caster, everybody can take this feat, by the way. It's called Ritual Caster. If my fighter had the feat, by the way, Wizard, special case for the wizard gets to start with Ritual Caster. I think maybe the cleric does too, but definitely the wizard. But anybody else can take it with your with your feat that you get. My fighter could take Ritual Caster, and I could learn the Animal Messenger ritual. And in 10 minutes time, I could cast it, and I will target a non-hostile animal, such as a sparrow or a raven or a fox, and I make a nature check. And depending on what my nature check is how long the animal will, try to deliver my message. And when it does, it will reach there and, hey, the fighter says he needs help. And that's it, right? Endure Elements is also a ritual. It's also tied to nature. And so my fighter could learn Endure Elements. Where the hell is Endure Elements? Here it is, Endure Elements. My fighter could totally learn this ritual, and it's a level 2, so my character has to be at least level 2, and then I learn them, and I could spend 10 minutes, and it lasts for 24 hours, and I don't even have to make a check, by the way. No check. I just need to have nature trained. And it says, I can designate up to 5 ritual participants, including myself, who ignore penalties from extremes of non-magical weather. We're fine between -50 and positive 140 degree Fahrenheit. So when our group is about to go on this adventure into, we cross the mountain range and then we see it. It's the trackless desert of Amansu. And, the temple that we are seeking is in the center of this desert, but it's, a several day journey through horrendous temperatures. My fighter can produce the Endure Elements ritual, and it costs them 20 gold in magical components. That's it. And they're not a spellcaster, but they get to do this cool thing. Now, obviously, spellcasters are going to have these too. And like I said, wizards start with this feat for free. They don't even have to take it. But, a lot of the things that we think of about spells, why is this a spell? Like, why is my character being forced to take it? Because you don't take rituals. They're just in your ritual book, and you can just cast them. You just do them whenever. The only difference is they usually take, 10 minutes to an hour to cast. So Make Whole is not a spell that anyone has. It's just a ritual, and you just do it. Magic Mouth is not a spell that someone takes and uses their slots on. The game says, you know what? That's for cool stuff like fireballs and acid arrows. Okay. creating phantom steeds for us to ride, awesome, very cool. Like, I want that to be part of the game. But this isn't something that somebody, oh, I didn't prep phantom steeds today. Nope. If you have phantom steeds, it's in your book. It doesn't even matter if you're a spellcaster. You just have to have the Arcana check. And when you go to summon your phantom steeds, you make an Arcana check. And guess what? If you get a 19 or lower, you get up to 8 horses. And their speed is 10. That's 10 squares. So that would be the equivalent of speed 50 feet in other D20 games. And that's it. But if my Arcana check is high, like 40, well, then they can fly, right? So it's, it is the case that a lot of these classic abilities, if you're wizard or your caster or even your fighter, if they have all these rituals, they have them on tap 24/7. They could just use them, and they can just produce these effects. And that's pretty cool to me. Like that I don't have to choose between casting Water Walk so that my party can go on the fun underwater adventure or the fun, water dungeon, like in Link. I don't have to choose between Water Walk and Lightning Bolt or like Water Walk and Acid Arrow. Like, nope, you just have Water Walk. And if I didn't prepare it for the day and we have to cross water, it's not like, oh, we're completely screwed up. Oh, look at this. It's still nature. It's still no check. So the fighter goes, hold on a moment. They spend 10 minutes. They spend 20 gold pieces of primal nature components. Maybe they start sprinkling little crushed leaves and flowers on you. And you or an ally can move on water as if it was solid ground. And it lasts for 1 hour. It just works. There's no check at all. Water breathing. Now, this one's a little bit higher. You got to be level 8, but it takes 10 minutes. You can designate up to 8 participants. You make an Arcana or nature check, and that determines whether it lasts 1 hour all the way up to 24 hours. And that's it. Again, most of these things are 10 minutes. Some of them are 1 hour. And the whole point of the ritual system is, again, trying to divorce the combat from the non-combat, and to really sort of drive this idea home that, these are different systems of play. And I thought these were fantastic. I thought these were awesome. I thought these were amazing. We got Raised Dead in here too, right? Yeah, Raised Dead. Let's take a look at Raised Dead. I know my alphabet. So Raised Dead, you have to have, it takes 8 hours. So this is a long one. And you have to spend, they can't have been dead for more than 30 days. They return with a death penalty, which is a -1 to attacks, skills, and saving throws and ability checks. And it fades. Oh, this is very nice. They phase after the subject reaches 3 milestones. Now, what's a milestone? A milestone is every time you do 2 encounters in a row. Like you have an encounter and then you have another encounter. That's a milestone. That means that if I get raised dead and if I spent 3 months resting, I still have that -1 penalty. Now you might say, that doesn't even make any sense. And you're right. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe your GM says, you know what, you're resting for, months and months and months. We'll waive the penalty. But the long and the short of it is they said, look, you died. That should mean something. You shouldn't just get to sleep that off. And so the game is designed to sort of make you have to have at least a -1 penalty for a couple of encounters because, you should feel that. But again, there's no check. You just raise them from the dead. Like they died. Isn't that bad enough? One that we've talked about a lot before in Pathfinder 2, remove affliction. Remove affliction just ends an affliction automatically. Removes curses, charm, and domination, polymorph, petrification. It just ends it. Now, that being said, you do have to make a check. And if you make a heal check and you look at your level and the level of the effect that you're trying to remove, and if you roll low enough or negative enough, you kill the target that you're trying to remove the curse from. So this is why your level, this is why your level 10 cleric can't go remove the level 25 curse, because it'll kill them. So, that's kind of cool. But assuming that it's even somewhat close to your power level, you know what? You just succeed. Remove affliction sometimes has the additional cost of raised debt attached. I love it. But you do remove the affliction. That is true. So again, I think, I think 4E is appealing to these for these 5E players who are looking for a game that has a lot more structure. A lot of the structure in 4E is very reminiscent of the structure in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. But people maybe don't want to play Pathfinder. They want to keep playing D&D. That could be very appealing to them. There are things, there are certainly things in Pathfinder 2 and from other games like 13th Age and stuff like that, that I think they're great innovations of the D20. Look, like this game came out in 2008. It's 2022. It's about to be 2023. So it's been, 13 years, 15 years. People have figured out some good stuff about D20 since then. The escalation die from 13th Age is really, really cool. I like it a lot. It has certain problems that we're not going to get into right now, but the critical effect of getting 10 or over is kind of a fun effect in Pathfinder 2. It does create some unforeseen problems that are sort of apparent to me, but there are certain key ideas and differences that I think are really, really nice. RPG Musings, I ported the escalation die from 13th Age into 4E and it shortened combats to 4E. Agreed, and also agreed. We played a lot of 13th Age. I think we've done I've done it with several different groups, so I think I've actually done three 13th Age campaigns, 1 to 10. I love the escalation die, and I have not had a chance. I think in Aaron's last 4th edition campaign he ran, he used the escalation die. I don't know if you used it for Ancient Kingdoms 1, but I definitely know you used it for Ancient Kingdoms 2. Phoenix, I love that it has just X gold and not like X worth of diamonds, since I forgot I brought diamonds. Yes, that's true. Phoenix, it's not really specific about like what it is. Like you can't just like pour gold on them, but like it's just like generic universal magical components is basically what it costs. 13th Age is like a variant rule stock for 4E as well. It should be, because 13th Age was written by the lead designer of 4th edition. And the lead designer of 3rd edition, John Tweet. So I always say that 13th Age is there we go. 13th Age is 3rd edition plus 4th edition at plus Powered by the Apocalypse. Or like plus indie games. So it's like 13th Age 13th Age. Gosh. 13th. Here we go. Age equals 3E plus 4E plus indie games. Which is one of the reasons I like it so much. In fact, actually, they're coming out with a 2nd edition. I actually reached out to Rob Heinso and I was like, hey, I kickstarted 13th Age and 13 True Ways, and we got a YouTube channel. And I don't know if you want to check it out, but if you guys want to send us some stuff and we could talk about it and I'll look at the rules. And they were like, yeah, that's awesome. That's great. And he responded back to me and gave me a bunch of rules and said he checked out our channel, and that was pretty cool. So I don't know, maybe we'll get to do it or not, but anyways, I think that I think 4th edition has a lot going for it. And again, the people who say, oh, it's not anything like old D&D. Look at the page that I'm on. It still has this shit. How many miles per day you can travel, and how far can my war horse go, or my rowboat, or what if I'm going downstream? And oh no, I could travel 30 miles per day, but I am in extensive difficult terrain and forests and hills. So I move at 3/4 speed. So that means I'm only going to cover, 21 miles. It's like, it has all the same stuff that has been a part of the game, forever. So these things are still here, marching order and all this stuff. And I think that's, it's got rules for vision and light and all the stuff that has always been in D&D. It's literally all still here. You get experience points for rewards. When you're in combat, you're probably going to make attacks and you're probably going to cast some spells. When you're outside, you're going to get magical items, which themselves are really cool. They do fun things. They give you cool powers and abilities. That we didn't even talk about that as a resource, but that was another thing that made people lose their mind. I forgot about that one. In 4th edition, you'll see that, by the way, in 4th edition, just like how fighters get magical swords and magical axes, warlocks and wizards and clerics get, magic wands and magic staffs, and they're not like the wands that you're used to. They work like magic swords. They add plus X, to your attack roll. So if I have a wand of fiery burst, I get to, I get to add +3 or +4 to my spell attack rolls. In this game, if you're a wizard or if you're a cleric or a warlock, you attack with your spells. And so you get to get cool wands and staves and rods as well. But they also originally had this thing here for these daily powers. And originally, when the game came out, these were limited. And people hated this. Now, to be clear, if what I'm saying sounds crazy, Pathfinder 2 tried to do this. Pathfinder 2 originally included a rule called resonance, and it limited the number of magical items that you could use in a day. And you had to spend resonance to use them, even something like a scroll. And everybody lost their minds in the playtest. And they rolled it back at the last minute in the 0th hour. And several classes, like the alchemists, were left holding the bag and suffered as a result of it. And now you have the problem where characters can take things that don't require investing, and don't require investiture, and like scrolls, and they just can take hundreds of them and they can just spam them nonstop and just, golf bagging. Exactly. Because there's no limitation, but that's more real, I guess. When 4th edition came out, they tried to limit this by, you had a limit to the number of magical items that you could use each day. Every time you fought, or I should even say fought, because they literally were just called encounters. Every time you had 2 encounters, you would get an additional usage of a daily magical item each day. And I think that's awesome. At the end of 4th edition, in a great tragedy, they created this line called the Essentials line, which I hate. They tried to just roll back all the cool things that they did in the game in an attempt to appease their old market, which was never going to play in their game anyways, and had mostly moved on to Pathfinder 1 or just stuck with 3rd edition or 2nd edition that they've been playing forever. And they tried to appeal to them by making everything that was cool about the game. They got rid of it, and I hate Essentials almost entirely without qualification. What are my thoughts on the pseudo essentials like Berserker? Don't like them. I don't like any of the classes from Heroes of Forgotten Kingdom. I don't like Heroes of Fallen Lands. I don't like anything. What are my thoughts on it? Is Essentials like the Big Six? No, Ryan. Essentials was a sort of 4.5. It was like a real ghost edition that they put out at the end of the game, but they didn't call it 4.5. But it was basically like, hey, remember all the cool stuff we did in D&D 4th edition? Well, we understand that some of you don't like it. So here's D&D 4th edition with like the D&D 4th edition rules, but like no powers and no of this crazy nonsense. And like here, I'll give you a great example of this. When the game came out, the wizard got Magic Missile. And it was an at-will ability. That meant Magic Missile was a cantrip, okay? And the wizard could just cast Magic Missiles. That was what they did. Just pew, pew, pew. They just cast Magic Missiles. And guess what? Because it's 4th edition and things should be balanced and things should be fair, Magic Missile, I'm going to zoom in on it here. Magic Missile had an attack roll. You had to make an attack roll with your magical missile. They broke the sacred cow. They did the unthinkable. It was pretty cool. Your wizard could just sit there and zap magic missiles all day, and at a pretty good range too. 20 means 20 squares, which is 100 feet. It was still totally fine. People lost their minds at Magic Missile. Well, towards the end of 4th edition, when they came out with Essentials, they changed Magic Missile and it became auto damage. Because they were cowards, and they're still cowards. You're seeing it now with 1D&D. They're probably going to shit the bed on this too. Honestly, I think they will. So, yeah, the errata. I don't even consider it errata, DM Gary. It was just like a rework. Well, there was nothing wrong with it. They just were like, there were so many people who were like, Magic Missile requires an attack roll. That's not D&D. And so rather than being like, all right, fine, don't play it then. I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's not what the game's about anymore. Females used to have strength limits in the game too. We got rid of fucking that too, because that was stupid. Okay. And they just, instead they just roll back their decision making. They put in these stupid classes and I just hated them. Ryan says, what? Which part, Ryan? The female strength? Yeah. Well, when the game first came out, strength limits were tied to your gender. It's true. But we got rid of that because that was dumb. And while in real life, maybe males genetically have certain strength advantages over females, there are still about 85 trillion women out there who can lift and bench way more than me. But also, this is a fantasy game where people are fighting dragons and they're elves and they cast spells and they just, what are we? That's the part you're gonna focus on. That's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. Blaine has something here. This is funny. When Magic Missile first appeared in GH, what is GH? Is that Greyhawk? Or is that Arduin Grimorum? I'm not sure. When Magic Missile first appeared in GH, it did require an attack roll, and it was BX and AD&D that made it auto hit, but less damage. Interesting. No. I think he's saying something from before BX and AD&D. I'm just trying to think must have been Greyhawk. The original Little Black books. Well, I don't have the actual original Little Brown books. I only have the reprints. So, see these are the reprints of the original. This is the original Player's Handbook, by the way. Just reprinted all 32 pages of it. And then this is book 5, and here's book 6. Here's book 7. Here is book 4. Greyhawk. Got some cool swords in here, some spells, some monster descriptions. Okay, here we go. Magic Missile. This is a conjured magic missile equivalent to a magical arrow. And it deals it does full damage, 2 to 7 points, 1d6 plus 1. So yeah, you shot it like an arrow in the original game. And for every 5 levels, you may add an additional 2 levels. So at 6th level, you have 3 missiles, but you still have to shoot them. So, That's very interesting. Cool. I did not know that. See, look at that. We're learning stuff about the history of this game even as we go. Yeah, 4E is even more old school. Oh my God, Brandis, you're so right. 4E just went all the way back to the beginning. The very first printing of Magic Missile required an attack roll. They were just going back to the roots. That's all. The whole thing is just nonsense. Like, again, you can dislike 4th edition D&D, but don't dislike it because of some reason that's wrong. Like, for example, this is a legitimate complaint I heard from people who were used to playing 3rd edition. I liked how in 3rd edition, I could break my character very easily. I could take a bunch of spells and abilities and cast like 90 spells and only go for like 2 or 3 fights a day and Nova and just be unbeatable and completely just raffle stomp everything that I fought and have no challenges whatsoever. 4th edition, I can't do that. It's hard to do that, and I don't want to be part of that. Okay, that's fine. Like, that's fine. Good night, Gabriel. Thanks for hanging out with us. So yeah, it's like, that is a legitimate concern. Some people play these games for the super duper power fantasy and they want to break their character. And guess what? I mean, you could break your character in 4th edition too. All these things and more. There are some people, DM says the magic item complaint I find is a real complaint. Yeah, people don't like the idea that my character can't. Oh, Blaine, no, that's awesome. I'm totally glad that you brought that up. That's amazing. That was a cool learning experience for me. I'm awesome that you knew that. And I love it. That's like a really fun factoid to put in my back pocket. But yeah, some people don't like healing surges or they don't like the magic item uses because it feels very gamey. And I'll be the first to admit it does. But in my older age, I have seen the problem with with going the other way. Your complaint being that magic items don't feel special enough. DM Gary, they tried to do something. It's the only thing they did from Essentials that I kind of liked, but they didn't take it far enough. I am a big believer that the magic items in 4th edition are very kind of underwhelming because they wanted the focus to be on you and what you could do with your character, not what your sword did. One of the complaints about 3rd edition D&D was your characters were, quote, magical item Christmas trees. And that if your character had a choice between being hit by a Mordenkainen's disjunction or being hit by a disintegrate, you would rather get hit by the disintegrate because I can get a resurrection, but I can't replace my gear. And your character without your gear was useless. And in 4th edition, I think they tried really, really hard to try to make your character about what you could do and what your power was. And magical items were just sort of a sprinkling on top. And I think that's fine. I think that's a good philosophy to have. But in fiction, in novels, in movies, there are some items that are as much a part of the character as any power or any sort of innate ability. Captain America's shield, Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, right? These are defining characteristics. And while I don't think that every magical item should be this special thing that needs a lot of attention, I think it's fine for a character to, at the very, by the time they're in their upper 20s, to have 1 or 2 magic, like they have a couple magic items that are just spread out of their character that give them some cool, funny, flashy abilities. But then they have 1 or 2 items that really stand out, that actually have some powers that are sort of character defining. But these should be like the big ones, right? Like if in our, Paragon tier, which in 4th edition is between 11th and 20th level, our characters went into a temple of elemental chaos and we fought our way through hordes of archons. And finally at the end, we found a servant, a secret servant of Therisdun, and we defeated it. And from that flaming temple, my character walked out with the flame tongue. The flame tongue. One of the most legendary and celebrated swords that has been in Dungeons and Dragons since the beginning, I'm okay with that character and that item kind of getting a little bit of spotlight time. I'm okay with that item being fairly powerful and kind of being a big part of my character's identity, because it would be, because that's like Arthur and Excalibur. So I don't think Arthur should be like that for Excalibur, his shield, his helmet, his sunglasses, his necklace, his cape, his bracers, his vambraces, his pauldron, his belt, his underwear, his coat, his shirt, right? Like, that's where it just gets just way too much. Put that shit in the background, you know? That's fine. So yeah, chat, Artifact Concordance, one of the best things that's ever happened. 4th edition D&D is the only Dungeons and Dragons campaign, Dungeons and Dragons system where I have in multiple campaigns at multiple times actually used artifacts and had it been amazing and fun and not broken in a dumb deck of many things type way. These were fun, character-driven, fiction narrative enhancing moments that came in, did something really awesome, left the game, left a resounding mark, and it only enhanced it. And we did this several times, and it was a great experience each time. So loved it. I mean, there's so much more. I mean, it's already past 10 o'clock here, but we haven't even talked about the DMG side of things, because for everything that I've said tonight, not a single bit of it even touches the reason why I love 4th edition D&D. And the reason I love 4th edition D&D is because of the dungeon mastering. This was the most fun, best. The DMG 1 and the DMG 2 are some of the best written books about dungeon mastering ever. Flat out. Perfect. But the monster and encounter creation rules, how to use terrain, how to use hazards, how to use monsters, how to build monsters, and doing so in a system that was super easy. I mean, these things have been going around on the internet now for at least a year or two. I've seen them. Is where people, and this is like on D&D forums, they'll have a big, huge GIF or JPEG, because it has to be that big. And it'll be like, here's the third edition Lich stat block, including all of the references to all of the spells that Lich has. And it's something like, 17 pages. And then over here, it's like the 5th edition Lich, and it's like 15 pages. And then like almost invisible because it's so small. Here's like the 1 paragraph long. Here's like the 1 paragraph long 4th edition Lich. And it's got everything. When you play a 4th edition monster, you don't have to look up spells. I cannot tell you enough how amazing it is as a DM to not have to look up spells out of the back of the book or out of a different book. Was I sharing the Liches on screen? No, I wasn't sharing the Lich. Sorry. I mean, we could look up the Lich. I mean, I could pull up the Lich. Monster manual. So there we go. Here's a Lich. That's it. That's the whole Lich. Yeah, everything you need to know about the Lich is right here. GM Gary, have you ever run a base math monster game of 4E? You mean just like using like MM3 on a business card type stuff? Is that what you mean? I probably never like did that like 100%, but I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of times where I had to come up with something really quick and I would just, MM3 on a business card and just bust that out. Actually, when I used to go to Gen Con, I used to talk and hang out with Sly Flourish a bunch back in the day. He was always fun to talk to at Gen Con. He obviously had some great ideas and had a really great beat on the game. So, and Theo, have yourself a good night. I'm going to be wrapping up here myself shortly. So there's no linking. Yeah, so there's no linking out to spells. Everything is in the book. So this Lich here has only has 2 abilities, a Shadow Ray and this Frostburn ability. Okay, that's it. This slightly higher level Lich has Shadow Ray, Necrotic Orb, and Entropic Pulse, and that's it. Because guess what? This creature reasonably, it's going to only live, 3, 4, maybe 5 rounds, right? That's it. We know these monsters. These monsters do not have to be designed to be fully functioning PCable stat blocks. They are literally designed, when you players encounter them, to live and die in 5 rounds, right? And so why do they need 27 abilities? They don't. You encounter the Eladrin Lich. The Eladrin's like a fey elf, and it cackles at you madly, and it starts off with a necrotic orb right into your cleric. It strikes them in the chest. It does a bunch of necrotic damage, and it stuns them. And you're like, oh man, this thing means business. And then the party starts fighting it, and then the next round it drops the entropic pulse, a burst that catches a bunch of party members in its damage, and then they're taking a bunch of damage, and then the cleric's no longer stunned. He comes in, he heals, he hits the Lich fires off one more Shadow Ray, and then it's dead, and then it's dead because they killed it, right? So that's all. It doesn't need to be a fully thought out complete monster. It doesn't. And I respect that that is not the case. The most complex monsters in 4th edition are solo monsters. And solo monsters are literally designed to be the one and only monster that you play and that you fight against for the entire fight. And so if we go to... oh gosh, what was it called? Open Grave. This is the Book of the Undead. I think we get Vecna in here. Could be wrong. Maybe not. Maybe I was wrong. I thought Vecna was in here. I was wrong. Where's Vecna? It was in here. Here we go. What do we got here? Monsters. Oh, here we Acerak. Oh, we got Acerak though. We got the Lich from Tome of Horrors. Because I have no idea where this thing is. Oh, here we go. Okay. Boom. So this is like the most complicated version of a creature that you're ever going to get in 4th edition. And that is, this is a high level 26 solo. It is, it's got 1,000 hit points, and, it's got Shadow Ray, Shadow Drain, Drain Soul, Azure Eye, Prismatic Burst, Soul Shriveling Pulse, and Consume Soul, right? This is as complex of a creature as you are going to get in 4th edition. And it's still on half a page. And you don't have to look up anything from this creature. And this creature is a solo. Look at that, solo up here, solo. That is designed to just be fought by 1 versus 5. And that's it. I'm being told 212. Oh, I was right. It is in this book. I just didn't know where it was. Here's Vecna, a literal deity. By the way, the game only goes to 30th level, and this thing is 35th level. And by the way, I shall have you know that in our first 4th edition campaign, this was the final boss of the campaign. This is what they fought at the end of the game, Vecna. And Vecna itself only has a paralyzing touch, the banish to the dread realm ability, the Ray of Death ability, and the necrotic web ability in terms of attacks. And then it has a couple other additional abilities. But the point is, this is a god. This is the only thing. This is the big, bad, epic, ultimate fight of your game. And I'm telling you, this is a fun fight to run. But it all fits right here on one side of the page. And this thing's got 1,580 hit points. And guess what? It's still going to be dead in, 5, 6 rounds, 7 rounds. But it goes, it goes quick, it goes fast. So, sorry, RPG musings. I apologize. It's. I'm trying to think. Yeah. Look, Pathfinder 2 with the class feat system, and you get a class feat every 2 levels, and you get the archetype system, and you get general feats, and you get skill feats. There's a lot more customization in Pathfinder 2 possible than even 4th edition. 4th edition doesn't come close to the customization that Pathfinder 2 has. There could be no doubt about that. But I think, this is a full philosophy thing for me. I am not one of those people who goes on a path builder and builds characters. I never have been. Even before Path Builder, I don't sit there and go, I don't dream about powers, characters and builds. I don't care. I don't really care what my character has or what they're going to have. I think if you're the type of person who really likes to build characters but not play them, I think Pathfinder 2 might be the greatest game that's ever been created. But for me, because Pathfinder 2 character creation is a bit like playing The Sims. There is an option, and so many of them, for every little component of your character. You get to express some facet of your character through a mechanical choice that you can drag and drop onto your little virtual screen, that explicitly and expressly expresses what your character is and what your character can do. That is very appealing to people who want to be able to sort of build this imaginary character from scratch. And it's I'm sorry, I was in chat. I think Derek has my clerk. No, my door's open. I'm kind of cold. I have my window open too. It's actually really cold in here. Frostjack, great question. Am I going to go back to the question about 4E, 5E chronology? So the question was, if 5th edition had been 4th edition and if 4th edition had been 5th edition, would the tides have been reversed? No, yes and no. 5th edition, if came out as 4th. Now, 4th edition, if 4th edition had been 5th edition, if 5th edition had come out in 2008, 2009, I don't think they would have gotten the backlash that they got. I think a lot of people would have made the switch from 3E to, quote, 5E. And, I think people would have been like, oh, okay, this is kind of a more cleaned up, easy version, but it doesn't have quite as much crunch. And I think the changeover would have been as effective, but it would have blown up. It wouldn't have blown up if 4E had come out in 2012 or 2013 or 2014 or whatever, with a fully functioning, fully supported VTT, with the way that people today embrace D&D Beyond and virtual characters and virtual. Now, I think it would have been a much greater success than it was when it came out in 2008. I think people would have really enjoyed the game, and I think they would have really enjoyed the components. I think so many now people are used to playing games like Gloomhaven and Descent and all of these, very procedural tactical minis, board games anyways. And I still think that so much of what was the success of 5th edition in the 2015, 2016, 2017 era was, again, just the rise of nerd culture and geekdom, the presence of these very popular online programs like Critical Role, which really started to, sort of cement geekdom being, a fine and acceptable thing. And of course, ultimately, reaching a zenith during COVID when so many people started playing online. I think any edition of D&D that was the main edition of D&D would have been very successful at that time. But I will say that I think it would have done much better, just because I think the technology would have been better. 4E is actually a game that I don't want to say it's better. It would be better if it had a fully integrated VTT than playing it in person. But it's definitely a game that, like Pathfinder 2, I get when people say, oh, this game's better to play on the VTT because it tracks everything for me. There's a lot of things to track sometimes. And I don't like VTTs. There's something to be said about paying attention and being present in the game. But I think 4E's style and approach and nature, combined with people's willingness to embrace the game, would have made it a much greater success. That's a great example of that. WoW actually came out in 2004, Mr. Smith, not 2006, but yeah. But yeah, right. We think of 4E, it's like, oh, it was WoW. It's like, yeah, when they started designing this game, it was 2006, I think. So, World of Warcraft had literally been out for, I think WoW came out in spring of 2004 or something like that, maybe even summer of 2004. So it probably would have only been like, yeah. So there you go. They started in 2004. DM Gary said, and we can trust DM Gary. So yeah, they were literally designing this at the same time as WoW was being in. So it's really crazy. That these things could happen. So, Awesome is in the chat, says, as someone who started playing TTRPGs during the pandemic, I can confirm I started with 5e just because I was interested in D&D, and I had no other idea that other editions were even played at first. Yeah, exactly. So whatever the edition was, that's what people would have played. But I still think that 4e suffered because, now D&D is, RPGs in general have evolved. The two RPGs that won RPG of the Year this year, there was a time in 2012 or whatever, Pathfinder 1 won the ENnie for like best game of the year. This year, first place was Thirsty Sword Lesbians, which is a queer focused Powered by the Apocalypse game. And second place was The Root RPG, which is a game of anthropomorphic political warfare and struggle, also Powered by the Apocalypse game. The zeitgeist of role-playing games has changed so much. And even back in 2008, role-playing games were all about overweight, middle-aged white men playing, in their game basements or in their garages. The culture was pretty not diverse, and I was a big part of it. I was in that culture. And, so when 4E came out, there was all this, gnashing of teeth and people being very upset about them changing the game, and they're being very liberal, and not like in a political way, but just like they're changing things. They're changing things. And I don't want things to change. We've been playing this way for 30 years. Change is bad. And these are the people who, would just kept playing D&D the same way forever. And so, yeah, I think by the time 5th edition came out in, middle of 2000s, 10s, and certainly came into its own and became a kind of a bigger thing in 2017, 2018, cuddly grognards, we call them. Yes, I called them grognards earlier, but a couple people didn't know what that term meant. So for historical context, Grognards were sort of the old guard, the soldiers of Napoleon's campaigns that were sort of his seasoned veteran soldiers. But yeah, it's 4E would have been in a place where I think people would have been much more accepting of it and much more interested and exciting to play into it. And I think, from what I've seen of people's complaints about 5th edition, like one of the biggest complaints I've seen, and I didn't believe it until I played with people who are brand new to the hobby, and people get really confused about the bonus action and the fact that sometimes you have a bonus action and sometimes you don't. And if you don't have an action that can be a bonus action, then you can't do anything with your bonus action. And that's a little strange for a lot of people. And so I think something like 4th edition, where you just get standard action, move action, and a minor action each turn, and you can turn a standard action into a move action, and you can turn a move action into a minor action. That makes a lot more sense. Yeah, bonus action is a horrible term because action is a term. So getting a bonus action makes you think that you can take 2 actions, but you can't. It's not an action, it's a bonus action. But sometimes it's a bonus action, and sometimes you just don't have it at all. It's horribly worded because they already use the term action. Right. So nothing is worse than calling 3 different things level. Yes. Spell level, 5e holder term. Again, 4E was designed with, this idea in mind of playability. And it was designed to use pretty clear language about what it is that your thing did and how it is that it worked. And again, there was a lot of people coming out of 3E that were really upset about, things that probably nowadays we just assume. We just take it for granted. If you go back to 3rd edition or Pathfinder 1, polymorph spell basically said, go get your monster manual, start flipping through it, find a monster, you become that, but only with your physical stats. Your mental stats stay the same, but you get the strength, con, and dex of a tiger or a dire tiger. So now you're stronger and have a better con than the fighter and the barbarian. Also, you can cast spells, and you get all of their extraordinary abilities, some of their special abilities, but none of their spell-like abilities, unless you have this feat. And it was yeah, that's how it should be. Because if I'm turning into a tiger, I'm turning into a tiger. But, 4th edition came out and it said, hey, guess what? This is a warden. But if I go to a druid and it's okay, I want to, turn into a creature and I want to, do stuff. And it's okay, guess what? That has defined effects. It does what it does. It doesn't you don't get to completely return your character into a different thing. Okay. You just, it lets you access some different powers. You don't get to have a better strength than the fighter just because you turn into a bear. I get that was what would happen in real life, but I'm not interested in what's happening in real life. I'm interested in playing a fun game, Phoenix, that is a great question to ask. Who is this ability fun for? The guy who used it or everybody else at the table? We were having a conversation earlier today on our Discord. And again, our Discord is just a part of the benefits you get from being a Knights of the Last Call Patreon member. But to be clear, there's bonus videos, there's community games, there's Northern Reaches, there's exclusive Q&As, but the real value is in our awesome community. But we were having a conversation earlier today about, problematic players and things of that nature. And, I said, one thing that you always need to be asking yourself when you're at a table is, am I adding fun to this table or am I just consuming? Am I just a taker? Am I a giver or am I a taker? Am I there just to be entertained and to entertain myself? Or am I there making the experience better for the other players, including the GM and including my fellow players? And me rolling dice and hitting the monster doesn't count, because if you could swap me with anyone else and the effect would be the same, then I'm not adding anything to the game. And I think you should always be thinking about, what am I doing right now to make this game more fun for everyone here? to make this a more memorable, more enjoyable, more pleasing time. And of course, while respecting everybody else's time. And then once that's happening, then it's like, okay, now I can take care of entertain myself. But that should be a lot easier to do if there's a bunch of other people at the table who are doing the same things that I was doing, and they're trying to make sure that they do things that are fun for me. I think so much of RPGs today have become, a consumption-based model. And, playing an RPG, especially as a player, is not like going to the movies. It is not like going to the baseball game. It is not like sitting down and watching Netflix. It is not a passive form of entertainment where I can sit down, turn on my television or go to the movie theater and say, I don't expect to do anything and I don't have to do anything. It's your job, GM, or it's your job, adventure. Entertain me. That's horrible. That's horse shit. RPGs are the greatest form of entertainment that has ever been created, and it's because of that social aspect, and it's because you have a lot of people all contributing towards the greater good. If you lose that, you lose the whole point. Oh, we're talking about spell levels, yeah. William Brandis says, I mean, the thing about 4E is it is clearly defined in what it is trying to do and what it doesn't want to do, which is what I want in a thing. I want cars that drive on roads and dogs that bark. I don't know why people treat TTRPGs like they have to be the Jesus of all games and perfect for any situation ever, always. I think that's just, we have unrealistic expectations. People will go and buy a video game and it will cost them $60 or $70. And they fully expect that they are going to sit down. They're going to have to learn how this game's controls work. What's the plot? What's the story? How does my character work? Maybe I have to learn a whole talent tree system. And they're going to put in 10 or 20 or 30 hours into the game. And then they beat it. And maybe they play some DLC or maybe they don't. And a couple months later, or even that same month, like 2 weeks later, they buy the next game and they're on to the next thing. But somehow people expect to be like, I'm going to buy an RPG for $50 and it's going to last me for years and it's going to be perfect and it's going to do everything I've ever wanted to do. And if it doesn't, I'm going to complain about it. And why don't you go play a different game? Well, I refuse to do that. I'm not going to buy a different game to learn a different game. What do we think I am? Made of money, have infinite time. Meanwhile, that's literally what they're doing with video games. TTRPGs get so much shit unnecessarily. I don't even know why. They are expected to be held up to this God tier standard, and I don't understand it myself. So, all right, everybody. It is 10:40, and I want to say thank you to everybody who hung out tonight. We had about 70 people here all night. So excited to see you. This is a great response. We met our tip goal. And that means we're probably going to do some more 4E stuff in the future, just to talk about it. And, I know there's some patrons on Night's Last Call. I think there's about 10 or 12 people who have been really interested in our 4E games. And I know some people are going to be playing some games, running some community-based games of 4th edition here in the next couple of weeks or months. So, again, I want to do more stuff about 4E. I want to do more stuff. Tuesday, we're going to be talking maybe some brand new games that I've never seen before. And I'm going to try to, kind of give you my first reactions to them and sort of pick them apart and understand, how they work. Dead Whip is talking about Fabula Ultima. Dead Whip, we've got a I don't know if there was definitely a Fabula Ultima test game that happened in our Discord, but I don't know if it's still ongoing. But Fabula Ultima does look kind of cool. I mean, as a Final Fantasy guy, at least back in the day, it is still pretty cool. Oh, Awesome says it's still going on. Okay, great. Yeah, so we have a Fabula Ultima game going on right now in our Discord game. So we also have a play-by-post Pathfinder 2nd Edition game. Play-by-post, yes. So we have a very, very wide range of gamuts in our Discord. But yeah, thanks for joining in, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with me this Sunday night. We'll be back Tuesday to just talk more systems. These are going to be new systems that I have not seen before, and we're going to be reacting to them, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. All right, everybody. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Night's Last Call. Peace.